What's this guy doing?
Now I'm
He's
official.
wandering around out there.
I'm going to call
like
him.
a politician.
This meeting is called to order. Please welcome to the June 14th regular meeting of the Board of Education. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Remain standing for need a motion to come out of exec session. Ms. Isernia, second. Ms. Slattery, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Please stand for the pledge and remain standing for a moment. Is silent meditation. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. So it brings us to the WSHM Superintendent's Report. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Pelletieri to update us on a couple things and recognize some very special kids.
President Scavo, thank you so much. We're going to jump right in as we always do. Again, we're going to recognize some art award recipients. Mr. Larson, are you with us? Oh, thank you, sir. Mr. Larson, you're going to do some introductions for us for our art students.
Good evening. So I'm standing in for Ms. Ferran, who couldn't be here tonight because it's her son Jonathan's birthday. So happy birthday, Jonathan. So this year, 20 students from Sachem High Schools entered their artwork into the annual Bay Area Friends of the Fine Arts Show, also known as BAFA. The BAFA show is a juried art exhibit that is held at the Gillette House in Sable each year. This year, 110 students from 11 schools participated in the show, Sachem North and Sachem East being two of those schools. 4 of our students were awarded ribbons for their artwork. So I'd like to call them up. And at this time, Grace Prego, who is an 11th grader at East, won second place for oil painting for her piece, Lemon Study.
Please. I like the sneakers. Come on up here. I have a pair of those.
Next, from North High School, a senior, Amira Sardar, and she was an honorable mention for watercolor painting for her piece, Blue Mosque Turkey. Also from Sachem North, an 11th grader, Jessica Lee, won second place for her watercolor painting of her piece, Field of Poppies. Grace, I'm trying to get you a friend up there. And last but not least, Anna DeArchangelis, an 11th grader at North, first place for her watercolor painting piece, Into the Unknown.
Ladies, turn around. Over here. Hi. When did you know you were going to be an artist? When you were really young? Did you draw with chalk on the sidewalk, or is that how you started? Both of you. See that? I never did that because I was born in the Bronx. I would have got beat up. And so that's why I'm not a good artist, probably. What do you think? There's probably a correlation there. I just thought of that. What's your favorite genre or medium? What's your favorite medium? Watercolor? Paint? Isn't paint like art? Oh, oil paint. You know who Bob Ross is? You both do? Yeah, I figured that much, yeah. Put a happy cloud, right? Do you make happy clouds? Happy trees, happy clouds. Ladies, thank you so much for gracing us with your art. Is some of your art on the screen now? We're going to come around and take a picture with you. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, that's the next step in here, I think, is to cover some of the walls we have in here. We did a great job in making it kind of pristine looking, right? But now we're gonna do a little decorating, I think, here. Okay, our next celebration is for our 5th grade district-wide spelling bee winner, and I always enjoy this, Mavish Ali. Mavish, are you here? Oh my gosh. I was going to ask him how to spell Pelletary. I was all ready. I'm going to tell you something real quick about Mavish and her school. We do. This is a little insight into how we operate. We do transition meetings, so our 5th grade teachers meet with 6th grade teachers. We go across the district and have those conversations so that the 6th grade teachers know what to expect from 5th grade teachers and how to support them from the students coming up to 6th grade. So I went to Hiawatha's meeting this year, and we talked about Mavish Ali, and her principal, Mr. Watson, and the staff there knew her so well that day they predicted she would win the 5th grade district-wide spelling bee. 10 a.m. that morning, they predicted that. I was like, wow, you really think you know your students. You know, they're predicting this. But that afternoon, it was a Friday afternoon, I think we went down to spelling, and Mavish Ali won the spelling bee. So to recognize as staff, a principal, and the teachers to know that much about the student, that she was that capable and that strong a student, really speaks, I think, volumes to her, her family, and to our staff as well. So I just wanted to mention it. So Mavish, we miss you that you're not here. Maybe you'll come another night and get this award. Okay, our next piece is now our AP Capstone student presentations. Are our students and teachers here for that? Oh, thank goodness. I was just saying, what's going on? Mrs. Hines, you want to do a little AP Capstone, please? Thank you so much.
I'm going to ask Ms. O'Doherty if she can come on up too as well. So we started our AP Capstone program about 2 years ago. It was a program that we're really proud to bring to our high schools. It's a 2-year program. And as you can see here, Mr. Wrightson and Ms. Caggiano have done a fantastic job over the past 2 years, really bringing forward everything around Capstone. I'm just going to ask Ms. O'Doherty to just kind of bring us through that journey a little bit, and then we can introduce our teachers and our students and their projects.
Thank you, everyone.
You have the microphone.
Yes, we were very proud to have brought this in a few years ago, and these amazing teachers here have been able to take our students forward. We're really proud of their achievements. I believe we also have a presentation by one or two of our students this evening, so I'll turn it over to them. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Caggiano. I'm an AP research teacher at Sachem North.
I'm Kate Dietrich. I teach AP Seminar at North. So the Capstone program is comprised of 2 courses. It starts with Seminar, which students can begin taking in 10th grade. And then as long as they pass the AP exam, they can choose to continue on with the program with AP Research. They both count for English course credit, but they're very different from your traditional English course. We don't really focus on the traditional literature that you would normally see in an English classroom. And instead, we focus on skills related to researching, analytical and argumentative writing, collaborating, and presenting.
So our Capstone program has a lot of benefits for students. Students who complete it, they're able to earn the Capstone diploma or the Capstone certificate. So students earn the diploma if they pass both Seminar and Research, and they take 4 additional AP courses and exams that they pass. If they decide to not take the 4 additional AP courses, they can still earn the Capstone certificate, which is just for seminar and research. Students really stand out to colleges when they have Capstone on their transcript. Students have been awarded college credit, scholarships, research opportunities, and internship opportunities. One of my students was just offered a research opportunity at Binghamton for the fall. And students really learn a lot of valuable skills that they can take with them throughout high school, college, and in the workplace.
So seminar comes first, which I teach at North, and we actually start the AP exam in November, so we jump right in. It has 3 tasks. Task 1 is a group presentation and an individual paper. So the way this works is students are assigned a group of 3 to 5. Together, they have to come up with a research question. It could be anything they want as long as there's research out there on the topic. They then each choose an individual lens or perspective to look at this issue through, and that becomes their paper. Then they come back together for the presentation. They look at the issue as a whole. They argue for a solution to this issue, and then they're each asked 1 oral defense question immediately following the presentation. Task 2 is the same thing, but now they're on their own. So they come up with the research question. They pick 2 to 3 lenses to look at this issue through in their paper. They talk about that in their presentation. Again, they argue for a solution, and now they're asked 2 oral defense questions. And then we also have a more traditional AP exam component, which the students sit for in May, and they have 2 essays on this last component. The first essay is asking them to deconstruct an argument. So they're arguing whether an author supports their thesis using relevant, credible, and sufficient evidence. And then the second essay asks them to construct their own argument. So they're given a stimulus packet of 4 sources. They have to identify the common theme that connects the sources, and then they have to argue for a new perspective within that theme. So putting all those together, as long as they score a 3 out of 5 or higher on the AP exam, they can then choose to continue with research.
So AP Research is the second course, and they're coming in with a foundation of research, and now in research, they're able to really contribute their own to the field. So they get to pick a topic of their own interest. The only requirement is that their research addresses a gap. So for example, a gap would be that females, there's a lot of research on them and their body image, but there's not a lot of research on males and their body image. So they have to find a gap in the research. So they do that by conducting a literature review. So they'll gather about 25 research studies, and that allows them to gain a really thorough understanding of the current research and help them to identify a gap in the research. They design a research method, all their research instruments, and then they go through IRB approval, which is an institutional review board. So we go through their research, we make sure that it's ethical, we make sure that everything aligns with school policy as well, and then they're able to begin conducting their research, collecting data, and they write their paper. The paper is written in portions throughout the year, so it has to be 4,000 to 5,000 words total, and at the end of their paper, they present to a panel. It's about 15 to 20 minutes, and they will be asked 3 oral defense questions. They have to defend their research. It fulfills English credit, and they take the English Regents in January, and to help them choose their research topic and make sure they have enough time, we offer a summer session in July to help them get started.
So these are some of our projects from this year from our students. On the left side are some of my task 2 presentations from this year. So I had a student who looked at the feasibility of colonizing the moon, Mars, or Europa. I had a student who looked at ancient Mediterranean civilizations and how they impact our current American government and legal systems. And I had a student who examined the efficacy of 2 different philosophical coping mechanisms for cancer patients.
For research, I had a student look at the impacts of parenting a child with special needs. I had another student look at facial memorability and different factors like your race, your gender, your age, and what influences it the most. And I had another student conduct research on child trafficking on coffee farms in West Africa. And this is just some feedback that we've gotten from students about the program over the past 2 years. One student shared, "This class has so many implications in the real world. I talked about in a research program application and was accepted. I previously applied to 22 programs over 3 years, and this was my first acceptance." Another one shared, "I've improved so much with my writing and speaking skills. I have learned how to write at a collegiate level, and I'm more confident going to college having these skills. Giving presentations made me nervous, but now I love public speaking." So it's a lot of valuable skills. And one of my students, Ryan D. Simone, he's going to present his research.
Ryan, before you get started, let me just jump in for a second and fast forward. Well, I'm going to go back and then fast forward to why we're all actually here today in regards to this. I was asked to sit in on some of these research presentations. About 8 years ago, I went to St. John's University to get my doctorate. It cost about $60,000 to do. And I had to do a literature review. I had to come up with a research question. I had to get my IRB approved. I had to collect data. I had to write my paper. And you guys are doing this literally in 11th grade, 10th grade, 11th, preparing in 10th, writing in 11th. And as I sat there and asked questions and heard the answers, it took me back to my defending my dissertation. The work that our kids are doing in 10th, 11th grade at Sachem North and Sachem East is preparing them for that level of understanding, that depth of knowledge that I paid $60,000 for to get, doctor at the beginning of my name. And we're doing it in 10th and 11th grade. So I want to commend our curriculum office. I want to commend the teachers. I want to commend this board for making sure that we took on a challenge like this external validator to say, hey, we can do this in Sachem schools. And just before, we saw some great artists. We always talk a lot about our great athletes and to think about the academia, right? So this young man, I met him this year and gave an incredible presentation about something that really was dear to him. And I said, you know what? We have to show this to our community and show what we're creating in our schools. In a little while, we're going to talk about the profile or portrait of a graduate, what it means to graduate from Sachem. This is part of this. So I'm really excited for this presentation. And again, we're going to get 2 presentations, about 5 minutes each, right? And you're going to give us some background, just examples. And don't be nervous. Very simple. Are you more nervous now or when you prepared for the presentation in school?
Probably a little more nervous then. I'm probably a little nervous
Good.
then,
Yeah. We're all your friend here. Don't worry about it. Okay. And you already got your grade and you already got your presentation in. So don't sweat. So go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me today. And my presentation is on the impacts of parenting a child with special needs. So with past studies and background information, special needs parents live atypical lives and need to adjust to their children's specific needs from a very young age, specifically after their diagnosis, although many factors in their lifestyle cause stress. And for example, parents receive inadequate support from the community and their own families, which leaves a lot of the responsibilities of caring for their child on them. Parents stress about their children's inclusion, which is found by Cooney et al., specifically in schools, both by their peers and teachers, which often requires parental intervention. And parents thus are more likely to develop clinical depression, which is found by Benson, which demonstrates the high stress levels they experience on a daily basis. So for my research addresses a knowledge gap in the field of study. And while past research, including that of Eckes et al. And Dare et al., acknowledges parents' high stress levels, they do not state which factors, including social support, lifestyle, medical services, and education, causes the most stress for special needs parents. And along with the population gap of Long Island special needs parents, which was not addressed in the body of knowledge, I sought to determine with my research question, how do the emotional demands of being a parent of a child with special needs on Long Island impact their stress levels? So my hypothesis beforehand was that special needs parents would be most impacted by a lack of social support. And I determined this because a lack of help from parents causes social isolation from the family, which is found by Ludlow et al., which would make parents feel as if they would put more pressure on the parent and make them feel like more of the responsibilities on them. And there was also a lack of understanding from friends and social outlets there in public that causes parents to feel overwhelmed and feel as if they're alone in the process, just because not everyone is familiar with raising a special needs child. So for my research method, I use a mixed method approach, beginning with a survey questionnaire, and I use primary data directly from special needs parents on Long Island, and I gathered the specific views of parents, and I directly identified which factors contributed to the most stress, which directly addressed my research question. And I also conducted a thematic analysis, which was a qualitative research method. And with that, I basically asked extended response questions and allowed parents to elaborate on their own experiences to identify perspectives that possibly were not identified in past research or not identified in the questions that I gave. So for my research process, I first created online and paper versions for the survey, depending on what the parent preferred. I contacted physical and music therapy office to prepare distributing surveys through, and those therapy offices were predominantly had special needs children attending them. I determined social media groups, predominantly Facebook, to spread surveys through. I began the testing period, and I offered surveys to all the clients of therapy offices and through online resources, although qualifications were that their child had to be within a K through 12 program and they needed to live within Long Island. I provided 3 weeks for data collection, and lastly, I collected data responses from therapy offices and online groups, and I analyzed all of the data. And here are just some sample questions, excuse me. I had a multiple choice style question, which would have answers ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree, and would provide a situation that a special needs parent would commonly face. And I also had, again, the extended response question that would allow parents to elaborate on their specific experiences and identify perspectives that were not previously seen. And for my results, in order to identify the amount of stress parents responded with to certain questions, I created a stress score, which is an inferential scale created to determine the stress levels of parents. It was used with a 5-point scale and assigned a number to each answer, 5 indicating the most stress and 1 indicating the least. And that allowed me to obtain a value 0 and 1 to represent the amount of stress experienced in response to each situation. 1 indicating the most stress and 0 indicating the least amount of stress. And that allowed me to compare stresses more easily. And for my results, it's a little bit difficult to tell by the graph, but lifestyle is just a tiny bit higher than social support, and thus indicating that parents were most stressed from daily lifestyle rather than social support. And parents specifically stressed the most for the future of their child and how they would care for them when they either grow older or no longer here. Trusting another person with their child just because they feel as if not everyone is experienced with their child just because of their specific needs, and social isolation experienced by others not being able to relate to their situation. And then also for my thematic analysis, I took all the qualitative data taken from the extended response questions and identified common themes present throughout the responses. So, for example, the most prevalent patterns included fear of judgment and a fear of judgment from their peers and uncertainty for the future. So I concluded that my initial hypothesis was in fact incorrect, and parents stress the most from daily lifestyle rather than social support. Parents stress directly, indirectly from children's intensive care and daily needs. And what I mean by that is that parents may stress directly from physically taking care of their child. And that may pertain to helping feed them, helping them move, and helping them accomplish day-to-day tasks that we may all take for granted. But they also indirectly suffer from discrimination in public, others looking down on their children, and whatnot. And most parents are also uncertain of how they will care for their child in the future, and again, not certain of how the future will almost look, just because of the uncertainty of having a special needs child. And for future directions and implications, I hope to survey fathers to broaden my understanding of special needs parents' perspectives, because in fact, 99% of my participants were actually mothers. I determined the effectiveness of intervention there. I would want to determine the effectiveness of intervention therapies, which was suggested by Dare et al., which would pertain to group therapies addressing the stresses of having a special needs child and raising one. And for overall implications, families and others in public must become more understanding of special needs parents in order for them to feel more included in society and feel as if just because they have a special needs child should not mean that they should be looked down upon almost. And also therapies and service agencies need more funding for parents, which is one of the topics I actually addressed with my research. And I was fortunate enough to be able to attend a local rally for the New York State budget, which was passed back in May. And I was able to use my research. I presented it to a local councilwoman, and I tailored it to help the cause to help increase the wages of aides for special needs children and adults. Ultimately, even though it didn't pass, I was still able to apply my research in a real world situation. And I actually even emailed my work to an assemblyman for New York State and the governor. So I was definitely fortunate enough to be able to use my research on on a different level. And doing my research as a whole was something that I actually want to do for a while, because I'm really passionate about this topic, because I do have a sister with special needs. So I knew from the beginning what I wanted to pursue. So this kind of helped me take a more direct approach. It's something that I was happy to do. And here are my references, and thank you for having me.
So really important research. I thank you for that. When I met you and saw that day, I was like, wow, more people in this community need to see that. And I'm glad this is being live streamed as well, so other folks can go back and see this going forward. The research itself is important, and then to show and reflect what it is our kids are doing. I mean, you took your other classes too, right? You took phys ed, you took science, you took everything, and yet still did this, which is really exceptional. What do you want to do when you move forward? You're going to be a researcher, or?
I'm not completely sure yet. Somewhere in the business field. Right now, I'm looking at analytics, data analytics. Honestly, the data portion of the project was definitely the most, not only the most entertaining, but honestly, it was most free flowing for me. It just kind of happened naturally. So that's something that I'm definitely.
I think the Mets need somebody in the analytics department.
Maybe I'll work for
All right.
them. Yeah, sure. Yeah, they need it. Trust me.
Incredible job.
Thank
Thank you. We have another presentation.
So my name is Greg Wrightson. I've been teaching the AP Capstone AP Seminar course for the last 3 years now. Ms. Dietrich and Ms. Caggiano did such a great job introducing the program that I don't feel like I need to walk you through the entire process again, as it's the same basic course, same basic deadline, same basic timeline. So the test 1, test 2, test 3, end of the course exam. I want to talk a little bit more about the students that take the class, the benefits that they get out of taking the class, and really why this is so important. I'm an English teacher by trade. I've been doing that for 22 years now. I love books, as Mr. Larson knows. So it was really kind of tough for me to jump into this because they're replacing with this. So it was hard at first to like jump in and dive into it. And I think at best, when Mr. Troisi and I were talking about it, he does the research program in East, we figured we might get 2 classes, maybe 2 seminars and 2 researches eventually. And it's grown exponentially. Next year, we've got 5 seminars, 5 research, because the kids have heard about it and they recognize the importance. They recognize the kind of work that they're going to be doing. And when you see projects like what Ryan just presented, and maybe he's going to give you a brief version of what he presented, it's amazing what these kids are capable of. And I saw it the first year we did it was 2020. And it was, we all remember, a very strange year. Kids are giving presentations with masks on. I'm seeing them every other day. It was a very chaotic year to begin the program. But even from there, you could see the value in it. And I know when I had, at that time, he was in 9th grade. When he went to 10th grade, I said, I don't really care what you want to take. You're taking AP seminar because this is going to help you. And this really works more toward your strengths. And I watched him grow as he went through it as well. He had both of these fine young ladies over here. They were both stuck with him for a year. And he got a whole lot better as the year went on. So more than anything else, the maturity that it takes to be a part of this program, these skills that these kids develop as they go through, it's eye-opening. It's impressive. It's amazing what these guys can do. All right, Ibby, he's going to do a little bit of his presentation. We had to do 2 over the course of the year, as Ms. Dietrich explained. So he's going to give you an overview of his presentation for the IWA. When you stop and think that he's a sophomore in high school. As a sophomore in high school, I was not standing in front of a board of education giving a presentation like that. I would have been scared out of my mind. I'm probably making him more nervous right now. But he went up in front of the room, and I had 3 classes. I had 50 something students. There were kids that were crying before they got up to give a speech. They were so nervous. I'm like, don't worry, you're going to be fine. And they got up and they did it and they crushed it and they loved it. And they were so happy when it's done. We had a party. It was great. So every once in a while, it's hard to remember that he's a sophomore in high school and he's up here giving a presentation. So Ibby, you want to walk them through a little bit about what your presentation was about.
Hi, so like Mr. Wrightson said, my name is Ibby, and can I just pick this up? Sorry, it's a little short for me. So my research was about cities and sustainable infrastructure, and my question was, should cities institute eco-friendly urban planning techniques in order to decrease animal extinction in particular? So some background information that I think is necessary to understand is that lately, in the past 2 decades, animal populations have plummeted by 69%. That is over 2/3 of the population. And urban expansion is one of the leading causes of this animal depreciation in their populations. And this urban expansion is also seen to be either tripling or doubling by 2050. Habitats are being fragmented and destroyed, and city pollution makes cities uninhabitable for animals. So green infrastructure is a very viable option that can be introduced to alleviate this. Some specific types of infrastructure are green roofs, which sound pretty self-explanatory. They're roofs covered in green foliage, and they offer multiple benefits. For example, they have offer habitats for animals when they're passing through cities. They can also be used to tap into the photosynthetic abilities and create energy. Also, wildlife corridors, which are one of the most important ones as of late, are corridors of trees and plants that connect separated habitats, which is, again, like I said, the fragmentation is the most one of the worst effects of our infrastructure that is not wildlife friendly. So we have Singapore, which I believe is a golden example of green infrastructure, and I call it a trailblazer of the sustainable future. Singapore has been a leading force in the need for a sustainable society. Its green plan outlines sustainable development that aims to increase vegetation, energy efficiency, and biodiversity. For example, 80% of buildings will be covered by vegetation by 2030, and 40%, there's an expected 40% increase in energy efficiency, as well as an increase in animal populations. So these are my references, and obviously the IWA is much shorter, but this is research that I care deeply about, the environment in particular, because like I did in science research, I also did research pertaining to sustainable energy using photosynthetic abilities and bacteria. And that was me being the nerd that I am with science. But in general, the writing in and of itself has been a huge help to me. There's a Harvard internship that I'm going to, and I believe that this class and the writing abilities that I learned helped me get into it. And I even referenced some of the skills and abilities that I learned in this class in there to get me to that internship. Thank you.
So thank you so much. I know that we took some time to do that. We have a lot of folks with a lot of things on our agenda tonight, but I thought it was so important to have that. Maybe stay there a second. I thought it was so important to have that conversation and to just to see that takeaway when we as a society say, who is going to solve these issues? Who's going to help us as we move forward? Like, what's our future look like? It's these guys right here. Right? It's our art students that we saw before who think creatively and can problem solve. And it's these gentlemen right here who are already training as sophomores and juniors to take on the world's issues and to overcome them. So I want to thank you both so much. I want to thank you teachers as well. Again, as I had stated, the administrators in your building, again, the board for taking this on. And I appreciate all you do each and every day. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we're gonna jump right into you want to take a picture? Okay. Can we take a picture, guys, real quick before you go? Okay, one more presentation. It's another important one. We just saw an example of what it means to go through Sachem schools, to be a Sachem graduate. We've worked on something called a portrait of a Sachem graduate, what it means to graduate from Sachem school. So we're not just handing out a piece of paper that says diploma. It stands for something. It means something. So people in this community, in this state, in this country, when they see Sachem on a diploma or a resume, they know what it means, what it stands for, and what they're getting. So thank you, Ms. Hines.
Thank you so much for having us tonight again. We wanted to revisit a goal that we had spoken about in the fall. If you remember, at the commencement of last school year, we gave an update to our 5-year plan that we had crafted and implemented over the past 5 years and all the updates along with that. We were tasked with not only creating a new 5-year plan, but a portrait of a graduate as well. So I just want to very quickly go through our developmental process that we've had. We did form a committee out of parents, community members, Board of Education members, students, administrators, teachers, and support staff, including our PTA and SEPTA, to begin the planning process for our next 5-year strategic plan for the 2023-2029 school year. Additionally, the committee was also tasked with crafting a new portrait of a graduate, which is what we're going to share with you tonight. The committee met several times during the school year. We did decide to break up into 2 subgroups to have more intimate conversation around both initiatives. Tonight, we wanted to present our first draft of our portrait of a graduate. We will be sharing the draft of our 5-year strategic plan a little bit later on, either in the summer or early in the fall. Okay, at each subcommittee meeting, participants discussed, brainstormed, and agreed upon the skills and proficiencies needed by a Sachem graduate to thrive as productive members of our community as they embark on college or career choice. The skills and proficiencies were then further refined to articulate the meaning and purpose. All committee member ideas and thoughts were recorded and then synthesized into what we are now going to have Ms. Moran present as our portrait of a Sachem Central School District graduate.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. So basically, these guiding principles will serve as a guide for our district moving forward. Those principles will be articulated competencies.
There you go.
Oh, geez. I'm not good with this. Unlike you, I'm short. Principles will be articulated competencies and skills which we'll use to work backwards to our successful upon graduation. I don't know what this is. Sorry. The 5-year plan will stand as goal-setting measures for the district's yearly Board of Education goals. All the guiding principles and goals will be visible in our curriculum, in our programming, and our lesson planning. So this is our portrait of a Sachem graduate. It's our vision for the graduates of Sachem Central School District. It's broken down into 6 skills or competencies. The first being confident and proud. We want our Sachem students to be respectful, proud, and connected to our district and community. They will be risk takers who feel they can be successful in their individual paths. We want them to be effective communicators. Sachem students are able to listen, express their thoughts, articulate their ideas, and work well with others. We want them to be ethical. Sachem students know the difference between right and wrong, have integrity, and are trustworthy, responsible, and accountable individuals. We would like them to be problem solvers and critical thinkers. Sachem students are thoughtful, curious, resourceful, and are motivated to think out of the box or through a different lens. Goal-oriented. Sachem students are lifelong learners who are creative, adaptable, committed to growth, and embrace failures, are self-aware, and motivated to continue their journey. And finally, we want them to have a healthy lifestyle. Sachem students are empathetic, practice self-care, understand the importance of positive relationships, and the significance of work-life balance. So I guess our next steps will be the committee will meet with. Sorry. Sorry.
I got it.
The committee will meet with groups of students at each level, middle school and high school, to attain feedback on the portrait of a graduate. Following those committee meetings, we'll meet with the teachers, parents, and administrators to share students' feedback and begin to articulate the expectations and activities that will support the growth of the skills and competencies at each level. And then finally, once the expectations and activities have been identified, the committee, along with students and staff support, will create a rubric to assist in determining where students are in their growth and development of these skills and competencies.
Allison, do you mind just going back 1 second? Thank you so much, Ms. Maria.
Yeah.
So I think what really is most significant about our portrait of a graduate is that these competencies really came out of a lot of the programming and activities we already currently have in place, and we just want to refine even more. So I don't want to make it seem as though we don't have things in place already in our school district. So for example, effective communicators, what better way to exemplify that than our 2 students that we had here tonight? So our AP Capstone program, for example, would be one activity that we see that a lot of our classes are expanding to now 5 sections in some of our high schools. Why not really take some of those skills and embed it into the other English courses, even though it may not be an AP Capstone program, let's say, for example, in every single one of our English classes, taking some of those skills and strategies. Healthy lifestyle, when we think about our SEL program, things that we have in place. So just really just defining it more, but really proud of the work that the subcommittee did under this. Dr. Miller was also a major part, led this initiative with Ms. Moran. Unfortunately, tonight he did have a conflict, but really proud.
Thank you both very much. Is there more, Danielle? Or
No, I'm
Yeah,
just going to try to get this.
the portrait of a graduate is something we're very proud of.
Any questions from the board? Portrait of graduate? Daniel, thank you so much for coming out and presenting to us. We look forward to seeing, what comes next with it. So, thank you.
President Scavo, thank you very much. That's it for my rather lengthy superintendent's report. I apologize, but again, important information.
Okay, so it brings us to the item C, student board member report. We only have Alyssa here. That's not here. If you have any updates, I know you're excited about graduation, but any updates at HMEs?
I mean, we had the last day of actual school yesterday. I wasn't there because of senior day, so we were away, but I heard it went well, so that's good. I'm like, yeah.
Excited for summer?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to graduate, but I'm gonna miss it, definitely.
Okay. Thank you, Alyssa. Okay, item D, approval of minutes and a motion to approve minutes of May 3rd, May 16th, and May 18th. Ms. Isernia, second by Ms. Slattery. Questions or concerns? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Any visitors, Allison? No? Okay. Item 4 is business items. We have a consent agenda A through G. Take us to page 6. Any motion, please? Ms. Isernia, second by Mr. Reynolds. Questions or discussions about any of the items? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Item 5 is legal items. We have a consent agenda for items A through D. Any motion, please? Okay, Ms. Isernia, second. All right, Ms. Pikowitz. Questions or discussions on these items? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Item 6, we have personnel teachers consent agenda A through FF. Any motion, please? All right, Ms. Slattery, second. Ms. Pikowitz. Okay, questions or discussions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Item 7.
I just wanted to address a few really critically outstanding things this evening when we talk about the teacher portion of the agenda. First, we do have some folks who are on the agenda this evening for receiving a probationary appointment. I do want to ask anyone who's here today, I do see you, sorry, Corinne, I see you up there in the second row. If you wouldn't mind standing for the board to also recognize and everyone to see that we have a probationary appointment. Congratulations. Also in the teaching portion today, we have 35 of our SCTA teacher unit members, as well as 13 of our SCTA TA teaching assistant unit members who are here tonight. up for tenure and approved for tenure. It's pretty crazy when you think about how time flies, but 4 years will go by in a blink. And we hope that the time that you spent here with us has been an incredible journey and you've enjoyed every moment and you continue to enjoy every moment and think about all the great things you do as you roll up your sleeves. You help those kids get to where they need to be each and every day. Your absence is a big impact to them every single day. You're missed. We congratulate you on your tenure. We look forward to continuing to work with you. And we would ask if you wouldn't mind coming up to the front. We would like to have a celebratory picture with you. We'd also like to recognize our principals, our directors, our administrative team who has been there along the way and will continue to be there, who are joining you this evening. And we have a pin to recognize and just, it's a Sachem Seal pin. Congratulations. Come on up. We'd also like to ask our administrators who are here joining you this evening to join us.
As I just want to say one thing to all of the, excuse me, to all of the folks. Maybe not. Yeah, I wanted to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, 1 second, please. 1 second. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I just want to say to the ladies and gentlemen tonight who received their tenure and got their placements, newly hired employees. You guys received tenure during the most difficult time I think we've seen in education. You had your tenure period during pre and post pandemic, which made it increasingly difficult to learn your whole trade and profession all over again. I know traditionally when you go to college and become a teacher, you learn certain ways of teaching and delivering a lesson, and most of that is live instruction. But to have to halt education and have to be able to do it remotely, on computer, and still earn that tenure status, We commend you. We congratulate you. It's a tremendous accomplishment. So I congratulate everybody here that received tenure tonight. We'll give you guys a chance if
Now you
everyone
can go
wants to
home.
scoot out and we'll celebrate.
Mr. Lapani, come here for a second. Mr. Lapani, I just saw your head from here. I couldn't help myself. I saw him all of a sudden out of the corner of my eye. Kristen, is that the administrator group in the next section? Mr. Scowell's going to keep moving ahead and we'll grab them?
Yes, we have
Okay.
our non-instructional and then our administrative
Okay,
section.
all right.
Okay, brings us to item 7. We have a consent agenda A through K, which is personnel support staff. Any motion, please? Ms. Cerny, second by Ms. Volpe. Any questions or discussions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Just 1 second, if we could just recognize, we have a retiree from the UPSAU Clerical Bargaining Unit. Mrs. Mathosian is retiring. For those of you who are not aware of Ms. Mathosian, she's behind the scenes in our payroll benefits office. So if you do work for us and you enjoy the benefits and your hard work with the compensation you receive, you understand that she's been behind the scenes as part of a team, and we wish her all the best in her journey in retirement.
Okay, item 8 is personnel, consent agenda A through F for administration. A motion, please. Ms. Cerny, second by Ms. Volpe. Questions or discussions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried.
A few other things to recognize. Number 1, Mr. McElhern was here a few minutes earlier. He was here to celebrate folks in the special education department as they received tenure from the Board of Education. Mr. McElhern is retiring at the end of the school year. He has been a wealth and source of information for our students with special needs, our support staff, and our teachers and administrative team over the course of many, many years, starting as an elementary school psychologist and working in various administrative roles. He will be sorely missed. We did enjoy an intimate event this week in celebration of his journey, and we wish him all the best and look forward to hearing great things about Mr. McElhern. Congratulations. We also do anticipate.
Kristen, if I could just say something really quick about Dennis, if you don't mind, and I did mention this to him and to our group the other day. Dennis was really a student-first type of administrator, and he exemplified that for me many times when I would hear a student out in my hallway, and I'd go out my hallway at the end of the day, and there was Dennis supervising a student because we couldn't get an aide to stay after school, and he was willing to stay after school so a student could take part in something that we had going on in the district that required supervision, and he would volunteer to do that outside of his day. So I really appreciate Dennis, and that really spoke volumes to me about his sense about his job and what needed to be done, and that was whatever it took to get done. So Dennis, thank you so much.
We are scheduled to recognize retirees who would like to join us at our next agenda, which is on the 21st, and we'll add Mr. McElhern now that he's officially been board approved. Also on tonight's agenda, we have a few more things to celebrate. We do have the board's approval of some of our administrators for tenure. We'd like to recognize them and ask them to come on up to the front. If you would please join us in acknowledging Mr. Desmond, Mr. Larson, Mr. Colongo, and certainly last but not least, Deputy Superintendent Mrs. Trombetta. Congratulations. We do have one more administrative assignment that was just approved by the Board of Education, and sitting to our right in the front, just 3 rows back, you'll see there's Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson was just approved to be a middle school K-8 tenure area principal. We want to congratulate her. She's been in many different roles. I've worked with her alongside her. Amongst many different scenarios over the course of time. She's been an administrator in all 3 levels. She's been a teacher leader and a chair, and we look forward to her journey as she comes through in a middle school capacity. Congratulations.
All right, item 9 is contracts. We have consent agenda A through LL. Any motion, please? Ms. Slattery, second. And Mr. Reynolds, questions or discussions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Item 10 is donations from Merrimack as well as Blumen House. Any motion for consent agendas A through B? Ms. Stephanie Volpe, second. Ms. Isernia, questions or discussions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Item 11, Committee on Special Education, we have a consent agenda A and B. Any motion, please? Ms. Volpe, Ms. Isernia, second. Okay, questions or discussions on these items? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Item 12 is monthly reports. Any updates from any of our Board of Education subcommittees? I know we're kind of late in the season. Ms.
The
Volpe?
legislative, we
Okay.
just got word that the school security bill has bipartisan support. So it's good news.
There's great news today that we
Yeah.
got.
I'm
Absolutely.
hoping that we can get it as a Nisba resolution as well.
That's on the agenda tonight. to
Yeah.
discuss. Yep. Any other committee reports?
Stephanie and I attended a meeting with Erin and a bunch of parents, administrators throughout the district to start talking about our field trips, the ones that will be consistent among the grade levels. And it was a really productive meeting. A lot of collaboration and discussion, and continue to try to get on the same page and offer the best experiences to our students. It was a really good, productive meeting.
Totally agree. I actually loved it, Erin. I know I said it walking out.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I'm very proud of that.
Okay. Any
You know, you guys think that's an easy task or something, right? That's a lot, right? To try to get us all
We're going to ask for a
across
lot.
10. Yeah. Oh boy.
Stephanie
Okay.
had a very long list.
Yeah. Yeah.
Long list. But that's
15
okay.
schools, right? 10 elementary, 3 middle schools, two high schools, trying to get everyone on the same page where we are in very different parts, like geographically even, right? From Tamarack all the way up to Cayuga and Winona, right? So we try to get all of that on the same page with our 12,000 students and 70,000 constituents in our community. It's no small task.
You're stressing me out.
Okay, item 13, closing comments for any visitors? No? At old business, I'm going to turn over to Dr. Peltieri to introduce the old business, and then we'll have a discussion about that.
Yes. Thank you, sir. A charter school update. Today, the SUNY Charter Institute met. My understanding, I have nothing official. My understanding is they were going to meet to approve the temporary relocation of the charter school from Central Islip to Ronkonkoma. That is not something that is a done issue or something that we will take lying down. We will continue to be vigilant in terms of getting whatever information we can in regards to this application for relocation. We'll get that information out to the community, to the board. We've discussed already what could potentially be with our attorney, what could potentially be this relocation for a year or up to 2. That's what was requested. Nothing officially, again, has come across to us, but I know that we will continue to work together to see that our voices are heard at the state level, at the SUNY level. I believe that after SUNY makes their decision, it would go to the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents then would be able to either accept that decision or push back on that decision or send them back to the drawing board. Chris, you may have a little more information on this than I in terms of, I don't think anything officially came, but we did read something from the minutes today.
Yeah, we got a document from the Charter Schools Institute, which indicates, I think they were going to meet today to formally approve it. I haven't heard officially, but I'm pretty sure that it happened, where it was approved for the charter school to be temporarily located within the Sachem School District. It indicates that the intent is for the charter school to move back within the Central Islip School District in the 24-25 school year. And the document that I have indicates that this permission will officially be ended by the 25-26. So in no event can it go beyond the 25-26 school year. The latest piece of news that I have, which I received right before coming to the board meeting, we received information from council to the Central Islip School District indicating that the charter school signed a 4-year lease with Our Lady of Guadalupe, located in the Central Islip School District, a 4-year lease for them to begin operating at that CI location in September of 24. I haven't seen the lease. We just received an email from council from the Central Islip School District indicating that that has happened. But just hot off the press, so I can't confirm it. I don't have more information than just an email from council for the Central Islip School District.
Chris, the approval that was done today with the SUNY Charter Institute to give them the 2 years within the Sachem District, does that still require Board of Regents approval?
Yes, in accordance with the statute, it has to go before the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents can approve it. They can send it back to the Charter Institute to make modifications or changes. If the Board of Regents does nothing, and a lot of times I'm told they don't do anything, it becomes official within 90 days. So there's a 90-day period that we may have to wait for it to become official unless the charter school officially acts on the application.
So, Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, so Chris, just the question I have is, it's really a real estate play, right? Because if they're temporary locating, right, I thought they were going for an expansion of their charter. Shouldn't they be barred from signing up our kids? They could sit in that building, right? But you can't enroll Sachem kids. The charter has not been expanded to include Sachem geographically, right? It's still CI and whatever the original charter was. So if this is more of a real estate play, they've got 2 years to park themselves. They should be barred from signing up our kids, right?
Well, we'd have to make an application to do that.
But if their charter hasn't been expanded, right?
As far as they're concerned, once the Board of Regents either they doesn't act or approves it, then they've received permission to operate within the Sachem School District. Again, I'm not saying that there aren't some potential legal challenges to that we may discuss, and whether or not we want to go forward with there. There certainly are some substantive issues here that could be attacked, and you may make a decision to do that. To the extent that this latest development with signing a lease with an institution with another location in CI beginning September of 24, that may or may not impact the board's decision on what you do.
Because their charter hasn't been expanded, right? Their initial charter was CI.
It hasn't been expanded.
It hasn't been expanded, right?
They just made an application to modify it,
Right.
to allow them temporarily to locate within Sachem.
Right.
Ms. Volpe?
Would the Board of Regents or the Charter Institute deem it in a negative light to open a school for 1 year and then move those students and have that transition? Why wouldn't they just wait to open until 2024?
Yeah, I'm not sure how they're going to consider that, whether that will be a factor in decision. I mean, I can tell you that historically, the Board of Regents has really rubber stamped, these types of applications. I think these may be questions that you may want to get your legislators involved, Doug Smith and other people. They may have the ability to have some influence. Powers of persuasion sometimes works with Board of Regents.
And
So
just
you
to
may want to
clarify,
consider that.
They're enrolling K and first graders right now. So
Correct.
those children would have to leave that building for September 24. So they would only get 1 year in the building.
Yeah, I'm sure, if that comes to fruition, some of those parents probably would return then to Sachem School District if it
And
went
the
through.
community needs to be aware of what's happening. This came out today after they've already enrolled students from Sachem. So do these parents want their kids bouncing back and forth all over, middle of Long Island to get an education for their students?
Well, they should
for
be
their
educated.
children?
They should be educated as to what's going on.
100%.
Ms. Saturnia?
Actually, Stephanie hit on a couple of things. One thing that Chris didn't mention was that recommendation with Charter Schools Institute actually was very clear that is a temporary allowance of 2 years. And if they are not operating within the Central Islip School District by July 1st, 2025, the entire charter would be revoked. So as Stephanie just mentioned, I would also put out the word that understand you may start your kid in K1 unless you want to start shipping them over to Central Islip. You might pay to start in Sachem because you're just going to be moving anyway.
Absolutely. As a mom, I wouldn't want my kid bouncing from program to program because you're basically starting at a new school in a year.
So I don't know what we want to do on a PR front on that, but I think that's in the public domain and that is a fact. So
I mean, it's something we could put out, as we learn the details of it. I think maybe putting together something to put on our main page, or Sachem.edu, as to commonly asked questions. What would happen in 2 years? Your child would be relocated. If you choose to stay in that program,
right?
But we could certainly, if the board is in agreement, we could do something like that. Put something together, maybe a draft.
We have to
Then
wait
go-
90 days until this happens, but because it does have to go in front of the Board of Regents, or they have to, I guess it's approval by no action, right? It's like a pocket thing. So if they don't act, it's approved in 90 days, or if they approve it, then once that's a done deal, we should.
And at that particular point, Mike, to the board, we then get into discussion as to what we want to do next. And that would be a legal action.
Right.
Ms. Volpe?
So two things, Mr. Venator, are they in violation of their charter by enrolling Sachem students? Because it just says Central Islip and it specifically says that, so.
Well, I mean, that's an argument we would make if we were to legally challenge the application process. So we wouldn't, I don't want to go into the details of it, but that would be one of the legal arguments that we'd make if the board were to go in the direction of, let's challenge this temporary location to Sachem. We would argue things like that.
So now you keep saying if we challenge it, is that something that we vote on in public session or do we have to?
Well, if to the extent that the board wishes to initiate any type of legal action, you have to adopt a resolution authorizing legal counsel to bring action on your behalf. So ultimately, you would have to do that. Yes.
And then
I don't think we need to do it yet. Or a lot of things could happen. I think we want to see what happens with this lease with Our Lady of Guadalupe. See if that's real, if that's happening. That could influence, your decision. But a lot of things have been happening. One of the things that also happened this past week is the town of Islip actually amended its town code to allow a public entity like the charter school to be operating within a certain region within the town of Islip. They had to amend their code. Previously, it was only private entities, and now they amended their code to allow public entities, which is, doesn't happen too often that a town amends its code. So there's a lot of things happening. You may see other school districts, take a look at this. A lot of people are unhappy.
Yeah, I'm just concerned, they've signed up some kids already, and, are we obligated then to start turning funds over? And what happened, right? So they've got 2 years before they have to get out. I'm more concerned right now with the next 2 years, right? What are we obligated to do?
All right, so the way it works under the statute is that, and we've already received an invoice. They're required to bill us every 2 months over a 12-month period. They've already issued a bill for the month of July and August. That, I think this is an executive session item that I think we want to talk about. And so I think that's something we want to talk about in executive session legally, what our options are and what are the potential ramifications.
Ms. Pigwitz?
Do we know the families that have their Sachem students enrolled?
We do
in?
have the names of the
Are
families
we
now.
able to reach out to them and discuss what the future of this looks like for them, and maybe meet the principals of the schools they would go to, like kind of just showing them this is Sachem and what could happen in 2 years, that then your child is going to be going to a CI location, and that the benefits of starting here so that we can track the student and help them grow any deficiencies they have or strengths and weaknesses versus starting for 2 years and then coming back.
I don't see that anything precludes us from giving out information that's entirely accurate. I think maybe we have to be careful on how we do it and make sure we just give out, the facts, nothing but the facts, but I don't see why we can't do that.
Meredith?
So the other part of my statement was, I definitely believe that we need to get more ahead of this. I think we kind of keep waiting. And I think that putting together that fact sheet, like your child's going to be on a bus for 30 minutes in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, like things like that. We have people, I live at the southernmost part of this district. It takes my kids 20 minutes to get up to North on a good day, and they're high school kids, like a kindergartner on a bus for 30 minutes, stuck in traffic with all that going on. That's a lot. Or at that point, it'll be a second grader. But I think we definitely need to have something like that we send out to all kindergarten parents, because just because somebody's not enrolled yet doesn't mean they're not thinking about it. So all the potential kindergartners in this district need to get this in their hands immediately.
Ms. Stephanie Volpe?
I agree with what Meredith just said. I think the community doesn't realize how dire this is and what an impact this is going to have on our district and how it's compounding into the future, but that's not what I raised my hand for. How are we getting a bill for July and August if they're not open?
It's the way the statute reads, that you get billed for every 2 months, so you pay it out bi-monthly over a 12-month period. So they just divide the cost over 12 months, and you pay six payments each of 2 months. It's the way the statute is written.
If they're not open, and say for some reason they do not open, we're not getting that money back. Because if the children go and then come back to us, we're not getting the money back. So, and again, I might be asking something that needs to be discussed elsewhere, but I want the community to realize that money can go and not come back. So could that be possible? We're paying for children that would be attending in September, but they start the billing in July?
Correct.
Any other discussions or questions? Okay, so this is something that we're going to be discussing.
Yeah, I think the payment issue is an executive session conversation.
If I could just jump in on one thing. I had a parent call today, speak to Ms. Principali in my office. This parent was down at Home Depot in Central Islip and saw someone putting the South Shore Charter School pamphlets on windows and things like that, and was so concerned for our district. He actually called drove up here and dropped it off for us. So we would know that it was happening, this advertising. I am pleased to see that it was taking place in Central Islip for Central Islip Charter School, and that's the way it should be, from the outset.
But Chris, that's a great comment, because the money that they have is going for advertisement versus directly to student education, right? So, yeah. Just one more point.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, so to be continued, you might as well leave it on old business.
Yep.
Yep.
We'll have to come up with a means by which to determine what information we'll have to talk, and if the board again has some ideas around what information we want to put out to our KN1 families in regards to this, whether we create a flyer ourselves, put something on the website. We have to think about that.
It could be a press release taking the facts that just came out, and then just sending it out to everybody.
I could use syntax
This way
for
it's
that,
facts.
perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
It irks me that they leased basically 2 buildings at the exact same time. Because one, they didn't expect to open to them. And then today they started the ball rolling before they even had a decision made on whether or not they were getting the original building, correct? So they came here early. Was that to just enroll more students?
Okay. Okay.
I think that's, they signed that lease because there's a build-out part. They've got to build out that facility, I think.
Isn't it a school? Our Lady of Guadalupe is a school?
Until about 2 hours ago, I'd never heard of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
So once again, this discussion will continue on as we move forward. Board discussion items. We have a couple different items on here. One is board resolutions to Nisba that's coming up very, very soon. Last year, we made several proposals, some of which came very, very close to passing. One that's very, very important that I think that we should put up is the school security guard training as a mandated requirement in order to get a license for New York State. That's something I'm assuming that everybody on the board wants to continue to pursue and represent to Nisba to get Nisba's support. I know it's gaining a lot of support, bipartisan support in the county. But if we're going to do that particular one, I know we have to change the language on it to the new resolution.
That's what I was going to ask Mike, that we need
Yeah.
to change the language.
Yeah,
on
I
this
think
thing?
we need to do is put together a proposed NISBA resolution now in support of the legislation, right? In support of the bill. So I'll put that together. That,
And I think you already wrote the language for the last.
well, the last time we did it, there was no pending legislation. So now we can.
But did we approve that at the board meeting, and you changed some language for that?
That was our own resolution in support of that. Now we're going to ask NISBA to do exactly kind of like what we did.
So Mike,
I'll take care
you'll
of that.
take care of that. Okay, other resolution? Oh,
Just real fast, Danielle from NISBA said that we really shouldn't put bill numbers on there because once session ends and then session starts again, many times up in Albany, the number will change. And it could get confusing and lost in the mix if we put numbers up.
So just by name.
We could use by name, or we could write, Senator.
Currently bill item.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, something along that, just so you know. Yeah.
Okay. Other items that we talked about was elimination of the Regents requirement for diplomas, which would allow students to get local diplomas in order to meet the requirements for graduation. I'm assuming that the board is going to be in favor of that as well. I think we're all in favor of that. So that would be a second one that we put up. And Allison, if you could just remind, what was the third one? Was it
The religious exemption. Religious exemption.
religious exemptions?
No, the third one was using reserve funds for
reserve.
short-term borrowing, so we don't have to prove a TAN. That was Proposition 3, at least based on what we had last time.
Did we have more than three though? Did
Yeah.
Yeah, we had seven.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So,
7 was religious exemption.
Right.
yeah, so that didn't pass last time.
No.
So is that something that we want to get behind again and utilize the same resolution, same language to
I
move
think so. I
forward?
mean, it's costing us money to borrow if we have the money.
We just
right?
did tonight,
So,
right? We
yeah.
just had to authorize up to $100 million for a TAN. All right. So, yeah, I would say, yeah, I would get behind that. Vin, you have them all there? Or just
Yeah, I've got them all here. I'll
If-
run-
if-
So the fourth one was called Local Control for Boards of Ed.
And that dealt with, making local decisions as to the curriculum that it's implemented into our
Yeah.
program.
Yeah.
Is everybody okay with that one as well?
Yeah.
Yes. So
If
we're
you
gonna
want,
s-
I'll work up the security one again. Let me look at the other six.
If you want to look at them, I
and
can just, if there's anything to modify, but I think they were pretty clean
They were-
last
they were
year,
very
right?
clean, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So let me just work on work the security one based on Alex's input.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
we'll put that past everybody again.
Vinny, your fifth one?
Yeah, that was sexuality education for students K through 12. And it resolved that the New York State Board Association opposed passage of, this has actually a bill in it, A6616. So,
Do we know if that bill is still,
It wouldn't change until they get
No,
back
right.
into session in January, and then it gets reintroduced, and sometimes it's the same number, sometimes it's not. So we may not want to, so we can advocate in the meantime on it.
everybody okay with, applying that one of the proposition as well?
Yep.
Yes, okay.
and then Proposition 6 that we had as a board was special education advocacy oversight. So I think you guys should be familiar with that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't. I didn't agree to that one.
Oh.
That was the parent member.
Yeah, you were
one.
concerned about.
Yeah.
Parent advocates, represented by parent advocates, amongst other things, special education committee.
That got shot down for valid reasons and concerns in the special needs community. So I'm a no on that.
Okay, I thought it was explained though, as it was a paid for advocate, not the parent advocates.
It was.
All right.
Yeah, but
I don't care either
I
way.
think Nisba didn't approve it either.
They didn't accept it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to niche that one?
Yeah, I would niche that then.
So that would be the one we eliminate
Okay.
from Sachem.
That was number 6 on our running list. And then Proposition 7 was the religious exemption. Advocate for the reinstatement of religious exemptions for K through 12.
That was for.
It's got some rationale in there about practice one's religion, reinstatement of for medical and/or curriculum requirements for those with bona fide and deeply held religious objections to same should be respected. So that was, I think we all voted on that one too.
Any opposition to that? I'm fine with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ms. Falby?
I'd like us to revisit parental control over curriculum a little bit more. I know the reasons why everybody was opposed to us allowing children to opt out of certain things. Maybe we have to rewrite that, but I really feel like we're headed down a very slippery slope with a lot of the educational pieces that are coming from NICED. And I really feel like parents need a little bit more input.
We could take a look at that. I mean, we have between now and July to revisit that, maybe modifications to it and then bring it back to the board for approval. I think the concern with that is that, we have an obligation to educate children, to the best of our ability, and that, parents are able to come in and just say, no, we're not doing that. Yes, we're doing that. Cherry pick the things that they want to do.
I don't want that, but I also don't want our children headed down paths that I don't think they need to be going down.
Yeah,
You
no, I
know,
understand.
there's a lot.
But I
going
think
on, like-
that was one of the things that we addressed in that thing was that we had control over as to what was taught and what was not.
We have to find more of a happy medium though, because I get what you guys, especially as educators, are saying, but you also have to see what's going on all over, and you have to see the things that are affecting parents big time.
Good, Mr.
So
Grillo?
there's a coalition of Long Island school boards, and to Meredith's point, one of the resolutions that they support is the New York State School Boards Association will oppose any mandates from the state ed department regarding matters not pertaining to academic subjects, math, science, reading, writing, and social studies. Local school boards are elected by their communities to ensure their values are respected and reflected in education. And the part that was added was if NICED continues to send things down, the problem with NICED is they're a body of unelected officials, and you can't hold anybody accountable. So Betty Rosa or the Board of Regents or anybody up there that doesn't put their name on a ballot, you cannot hold them accountable. And the only way to change them is to change the governor, and we tried that, and that didn't work. So the only way to change it is to pass a bill that would say that any change to curriculum would need to be voted on by both houses and then signed by the governor, so that you can then look your assemblyman and you can look your senator and you can look your governor at the end of the day and say, you voted for this and we've been way against it. You took out parent control. You said, you know what, your child can do this in school and you don't even have to call the parent and we can cut the parent completely out of the picture. And that's not something that we're going to do. So I fully support anything that says that, that there needs to be parental input, and maybe it's a happy medium of going in there and saying, not this, not that, but it's more than maybe just a curriculum council. Maybe there's somewhere in between that we can blend a relationship.
Okay. So part of that, maybe if everybody can take a look, and this is a good conversation, in Proposition 4, we do have a second part of that resolution that talks to some of that. So maybe we got to take what you just said and this and kind of maybe combine it or figure it out, right? But we did have some of that because I know we went through this last year, and it does talk about matters not pertaining to what has traditionally and historically been considered subjects appropriate for public education. So I know we addressed it, but if we have to kind of relook at it, maybe that's a conversation.
The conversations between that is traditionally what is that?
Yeah.
That's what everybody said. Well, that could be a whole.
Yeah.
So it has to be very specific as to what, otherwise nobody's going to get on board with it. Nobody likes vague language because that can go multiple ways on a spectrum. So that was the biggest concern with that when people spoke against it at that meeting, was that that's too vague.
But
So
you're
that
talking about the meeting you guys attended.
the
on
one that
this,
I went
yes.
where we voted
Yeah,
for
yeah.
it. So that was one we brought up and people spoke to, but they said it's just so vague.
Yeah.
Having something like that it can go anywhere on the spectrum with that. There has to be more, specificity.
So we have about
So
a
maybe
month.
it could be where there has to be a checks and balance with NYSID when they want to throw a mandate or put in new curriculum, that there has to be some type of, I don't know, curriculum council, governing body, like Alex said, that approves and disapproves or says, listen, this is what you have to do and what you don't, versus just leaving this vague kind of.
So we have about
the
a month
wording
to
of
get
it.
these in.
We have about a month to get in. So the ones
we
that
should
need the
work on
most
that.
work are going
Yeah.
to be the security guard training, and then we can certainly take a look at that and refine it. Bring it back to the board, see if everybody's in favor of it. If we can find that middle ground, we could certainly. Yes.
You're our resident resolution
And Alex,
writer,
maybe you can
so,
touch
yeah.
base with Mike as to what you just talked about.
Yeah, we'll.
Mike, what are you charging us for this?
What's your retainer, Mike?
It's retainer.
$3.50 an hour. $3.50.
Okay, I accept.
How's about lentil soup?
Let's make a
Mike, at the diner?
resolution.
The only other one, Rob, and I mean, this is the only time that we're going to have, I know we have a month, but they were very, and we spoke about some of this also, is at one point the governor was pushing high density. She was going to take over zoning. And it was in full support in that group. It had, I think there was 14 different school boards there at one point. So she took it out of this year's budget, but that doesn't mean that she's going to take it out of next year's budget. And she's going to be around for a while. So we have to make our point and voices heard. So we may want to talk about keeping zoning local again, so that we can hold people accountable. That everything is about local control. And that's just another step for that.
Okay. Are we okay with that?
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Well, they oppose that. Oppose identity zoning, but correct.
So Chris, if you could add this back to an agenda relatively soon, if not.
Of course. No,
Yeah.
I don't know about next.
No, I would say
next
maybe
week,
the first
but
one.
the first in July.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That'll give us
Allison,
enough
you
time
got
to.
that too, right?
And then Allison, there's certain forms that have to be done in a certain format that have to go up to them. Okay, the second one is do not harm policy. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pelletieri to introduce this discussion.
Thank you very much. It was brought to my attention, concern recently. Well, actually, it's been an ongoing concern for some in the community in regards to a policy that we have for our students in terms of calculating their final grades. One of the things we've done for many years, as have many districts on Long Island, is we give weight to the regents' results. That is in part due to the fact that we want students to work as hard as they can on their regents, obviously, and to pass those regents and to work all the way through to the end in their classes. So we've put a weight of 10% on there. We took that policy, we curbed that policy the past several years due to COVID. Also, there were no regents at some points, or some regents were given, some others not. And so that policy went away last year. And people referred to that kind of as a do no harm policy. where if a child struggled on the assessment or did poorly, had a low score, lower than their typical score, we would not average that in. We would not do harm to them, was what many people called it. This year, given the fact that we had a full regular year of school again, thank goodness, we felt that we could, in fact, go back to that 10% policy again, weighting the regents. I will speak to the fact that, we look at data, and our youngsters tonight spoke about the importance of data that they're learning in schools. And we did go back and look at our failure rates last year on regents when we had no policy in terms of weighting the regents, and we had more regents failures and final failures, quite honestly, than we ever had before. And given the fact that, and I think a lot of that in the staff and administrators felt it pertained to the fact that we did not put any weight on those finals in the region. So we did go back. We worked with our teachers, our administrators. They have been strong advocates for making sure that we do weigh those finals and those regions so that students recognize the importance of them and continue to work throughout the year. It was raised of late that perhaps this is harming some of our students, in particular our special needs students who might be stretching themselves. We have special needs kids all the way up into Algebra 2 for the first time in I don't even know if it's in our history, but certainly in many years. And they're really pushing themselves to get to that level, and I really commend them for reaching that rigorous level of mathematics. The concern that parents have and students is that my son has an IEP, he's pushing him. We're pushing him as high expectations. This is what we want as a district. And yet he's going to be punished because he's going to struggle on the regents. It's going to get factored into his grade. It's going to pull down his grade overall. And it's going to go on his transcript. And it's not going to look good either. So might there be something we do around students with IEPs in terms of this weighting, whether we reduce it from 10% to 5% or don't weigh it in for them and come up with a calculation where it's based upon either just a final or midterm and 4 marking periods, but do something that will encourage kids to continue to strive for higher level courses, even in particular our special needs students. But we don't want them to be harmed in terms of their attempts to get into college or their transcript or their final grades.
Laura?
So, I'm going to have strong opinions on this.
Yes, Laura.
So again, we're fighting to bring back a local diploma because we do not believe all kids have to pass 5 regents to get a diploma. That's what we are fighting for. That's what I strongly believe in. So when a kid like my son has to take the English regents 4 times, and some of his grades on the regents were 33, 34, yet working in class where his teachers can assess what he's learning, he did excellent. He was a scholar athlete, but a standardized regents test is not something my son should be taking. So then to bring it even further, if we have students, like let's say my son loved math because he did, and he wanted to actually take another math class that was a regents level course, but chose not to take the regents. It cost me probably close to $10,000 in tutors in Michael's 4 years at Sachem to get him to pass 5 regents. That is harming our students. Now, to bring it even further on a personal level, which I shared with you, Dr. Pelletieri, after COVID, as everybody knows, my brain was impacted. I had severe processing delays. I see the same neurologist as Michael, so I had to do the same cognitive testing. First time I knew halfway through it, I was not doing well. I am a Stony Brook College graduate, never once struggled in school. I knew I was doing so poorly. I left there. I was shattered. I can't even tell you. My cognitive testing score was lower than my son, Michael, who self-contained, ADHD, seizure disorder, below an 80 IQ. I've now taken that test 2 more times. Each time the anxiety that I build just walking in is probably even affecting me taking the test more than the actual test at this point, because I have gone to OTPT speech to learn how to compensate. And you've all saw me in the beginning when I got back on the board and I could barely speak to where I am now. Do I have to take notes? Does it take me a weekend to read a board packet and write a note on every single thing so I remember it? Yes. So if we are saying that We don't believe every child needs to pass 5 regions for a diploma. Why are we counting? So do you think that kids who don't do well are not trying? Is that what people are saying? Or did we have a higher failure rate because of COVID and our kids are behind? Like, I think we have to look at when we say we want to provide a culture of caring for our students, that having a child take a Regents to get a diploma is the stress, like what we saw on the first students, the stress on my family raising a special needs child that continues to this day. You are creating more stress by having that count on their final grade. So if his Regents would have been factored in his last year, he wouldn't have made senior scholar athlete, because his Regents 33, 35. Do you think after thousands of dollars in tutoring, knowing he was going to have to take it again, he didn't try on that test? No. So I think when teachers say they're not putting the time in or whatever, there may be kids like that. But if you're a child who is struggling so hard and you're taking a Regents because the state is requiring you to, why are we punishing them by now bringing their grade down? That's it.
Ms. Volpe?
So I agree, we absolutely shouldn't be counting them, but not just for the special needs community, but for all students. It should be do no harm. There are some students that excel, like my son Thomas, excels in class, doesn't excel on a Regents. And what you have to understand is the current 11th graders were in the last season of their 8th grade year when COVID hit. They didn't take a Regents for a while. What I'd love to see is the data on first-time Regent takers. So the kids who take Regents for the first time, what's their success rate? Take that and compare that to the kids that are taking a Regents maybe for multiple times but lived through COVID. Because I can guarantee you that kids that take Regents for the first time have a higher failure rate or a lower grade average than kids who take them years later. So I just feel like you are definitely doing harm. The kids have enough anxiety to begin with. And believe me, I'm not an everybody gets a trophy person. You know that. I just feel like this puts way too much pressure on them. I think we can definitely count their final grade because that is curriculum that's based on what the teacher has taught them. It is based on how their teacher has taught them. It is based on the teachers within our community who are amazing with our kids. But to have a Regents count, especially when these kids are so nervous to actually take the test, it's, you know, and then I also have a son who was in special ed. There's certain tests he can take, there's certain tests he can't take. And you give him extra time doesn't do anything except make him more anxious about the whole test and spending more time doing it. So these are tests that, like Laura said, we're going to sit here and say that not every kid should have to take them just to be able to graduate. Well, it absolutely shouldn't be counting for them against them if they get a bad grade on it.
Ms. Volpe?
I'm not going to talk about my kids because it would be hours of this topic, but it would have changed one of their trajectories in life had there not been a Regents requirement. I'm just going to say that. With that said, it's naive to think that everyone who comes through our district is getting IEP and 504 help. There are kids that are in general ed settings that cannot handle taking a Regents, not because they're not trying, but because they literally either don't have the support, have something going on at home, you know, a myriad of things. It could be anything. And especially coming out of a pandemic, having the learning loss, expecting this to be counted against their grade is doing harm. Also, it's against the suggestion of New York State. We just got an email from a parent saying that you don't have to put this in their final grade. So, you know, it's almost punitive, in my opinion.
Any other comments? Meredith?
I would love to see a survey of our teachers, all of our teachers, and ask them if they would rather have their performance based off of their children's final grades or their children's Regents grades. And if they don't want to be picked apart by their kids' Regents grades, then why would we pick our kids apart by it?
Sabrina?
Do you have data on these students? Like, so you said there was poor scores on the Regents last year, correct?
Yes.
How much did those scores impact like a child's grade? Like I was just sitting here and doing the math that a child who had like a 90 average going into it, counting 10%, you know, it's dropping their average, what, like maybe like if they got like a 50 or 40, how much is it impacting their overall average? I'm just curious if you have that.
I don't know. I'm confused at your question.
Like if you have a child who's successful, has an 80, 90 walking to a Regents, and then they're failing.
This year, because this is the first year that it would impact them. It hasn't impacted them.
Right, but we don't have the data of how much it would have impacted them last year, like what their grade would have been if we had instituted the 10%
No,
last
we just
year.
know how many kids failed and how many kids it would appear did not put any effort into it. And not just that, but also class grades and finals and midterms. You know, so one could argue either way. This year, it's 15%, 5% for the midterm, 10% for the final.
Okay.
But the midterms are only at the high school level.
And how are the children with the midterm? Are they successful on it with, you know, in
Yeah,
terms
I
of the
mean,
midterm versus the Regent scores? Are their midterms 90s, 80s, and then the Regents are 30s and 40s?
I can definitely collect that for you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
just to kind of see the difference
We,
between a district design test versus standardized Regents exam. And that's really my concern, is counting a standardized. I'm for a final.
I think we're all on the same page.
I know,
about
that's what I'm
that.
saying. Like, I think you have a standardized test averaging into a child's, you know, and anybody on one test could do extremely poorly. But I also, as a teacher, do believe in accountability,
Mhm.
you know, for the course. So it is kind of a catch-22 with that. I do believe in an end of year assessment of a child's skills and what they've learned. But at the same time, using a standardized assessment to capture that, I don't know if that's the best. And that's why they're going into project-based learning. But until we get there, you know, what is the best route to kind of have that balance of, we want children to be accountable for their schoolwork and to show their skills they've learned and what they're retaining. I think that's the biggest issue I see as an educator, is what students are retaining. But again, we all know how the Regents is, and it's a standardized test, and it's not necessarily going to produce the true representation of a child for that year.
We can collect any data that we need. Philosophically, I think everybody knows where I am, and we are as a district. I think the teachers were supportive of bringing back, it's kind of the devil, you know, okay, we're not there yet, but we also don't want to see our students just flounder and not take anything serious. But yeah, we can get any numbers that you need.
Like, I mean, I know other districts, some are up as high as 15 or 20,
Mhm.
some are as low as 5, you know, and I sat in with a lot of my students and we put like, well, if you got this on a final, this is how it would change your average. And it wasn't a huge drastic change. So I'm curious of that data of where were the students to start and where were they,
We
what
can
that
go
data
back
looked like
prior
and how
to the
much is it
pandemic
impacting.
as well.
But I still, again, using a standardized test as a final assessment, I'm not.
Can I just offer it at this point in time that I believe it may even be virtually all the courses that end in a Regents do not have a final. They use the Regents as the final.
Right. Only during the time that we did not have the Regents during the pandemic years, we also offered a final at that time too for any of those courses.
Can I ask another question? A student who's enrolled in a course that does end in a Regents exam, do they have to take it if it's not going to count towards? I know right now they still need it for a graduation requirement, but if a student's taking that Regents level course, but they don't need that one, like they've already passed the requirement for that subject, do they need to take the Regents in that course?
We do at this time require students to do that because we don't want
Even though they
students.
don't need it for a graduation requirement.
They don't need it for a graduation requirement. It's part of the course. So we ask them to take that. We don't ask, we tell them to come to take the Regents. Currently, we still have the Regents in New York State. The commission is looking, but currently we still obviously still have it. And our students are obligated to take the Regents at the end of the course. And there is no other final at the end of those Regents courses. So the kids would not have a final year end assessment. Unless, of course, we told the teachers to start to make all those finals. And I certainly would not do that now that we're already in the Regents season for this year. That's something that we want to contemplate going forward, see what the state direction is in terms of Regents, and then revisit this.
Just to
clarify a couple things, is it indeed a fact that the Regents is not required by the state?
The Regents is required for graduation. 5 Regents are required for graduation. If I have my,
Wait, is that a Sachem thing or is that a state thing?
no, that's state.
that's the state.
Yep.
Oh,
If
okay.
I have my, so I'll give you an example. If I have my algebra regents already and I have my geometry regents, I probably have met the criteria to graduate for math at least. The example that's been given to me of late is we have a child now in Algebra 2 who already passed the other regions that he needed the algebra to graduate high school. So why punish him by forcing him to take the Algebra 2 regions? That's what's been presented to me. And I argue that obviously we have high expectations. We want students to do the best that they can and that they should strive to achieve. And at the end of the year, it would show where they stand in terms of the work that they've achieved and what they've accomplished in the course. It's an end course summative exam, so I would want students to take it. But I obviously hear from our parents and other folks in regards to their concerns about that.
Okay, well, I mean, like, as you know, we wrote the resolution, which talked to children who we feel this would be causing unnecessary stress, so that we thought they shouldn't have to take those. I think that we're still kind of in that same position.
Correct.
But also, isn't there some sort of financial benefit to getting high grades on your region? PSAT, oh, that's the PSAT I'm thinking of, where you get PSAT high score on that, you can get a region scholarship. That's different? That's not us. That's SAT. SAT, yeah. So there's no financial incentive to getting Regents diplomas, advanced Regents diplomas.
Well, one would argue that getting an advanced Regents diploma might, in fact, get you to an institution that you might not otherwise get in terms of college and college and career readiness. You could try to extrapolate that out, but there isn't no immediate financial incentive.
So right now, and this was the way it was when I was in school, maybe Rob was in school, that the classes that are Regents classes are just using that Regents as the final.
That's correct.
Okay.
Ms. Volpe?
One thing I forgot to mention before is that the state is advocating for project-based assessments. So can we be a leader in that regard and then maybe substitute, in the optional area where you were referring that a child might be taking a Regents course, then to have an alternate assessment for them, especially the ones that do poorly on standardized tests, and you can see that in their history, right?
This was asked of us that we try to be a leader in this regard, and I know that Mrs. Hines has spoken to those folks in that realm to try to get us on board with that, being a part of that pilot.
Okay, and then
Hasn't
another
been
thing that
decided yet.
a parent brought to my attention is that our kids that take advanced placement courses have the option to take a final or not if it's going to negatively impact their grade. In that situation, that's attaining a super high goal. For a child that struggles to pass, this is an issue of passing or failing. And the difference for a kid in a 60s or a 70s bracket, their impact even on their transcripts could be a lot bigger than it would be for someone who's getting hundreds and 90s, because that little bit could bring them down an entire grade level and put them from a C to a D or a D to an F, and the recovery is so much harder. And we're giving this opportunity to our high achievers already. So I could see that argument as well.
Mr. Reynolds?
So just a comment, I agree with my colleagues on the use of the Regents for the final grade. And I think back to last year with the geometry Regents. I know we had that conversation, right? So kids going into geometry with high grades, most of them did not do well on their Regents, right? So while I understand what you're saying, and I understand that didn't really sort of, we had to do no harm last year, what's to say that doesn't happen again, right? So we have no control over these standardized tests, right? Versus, we're building curriculum, we're teaching them. We shouldn't be using that state assessments against them. So,
Laura?
And just quickly, so again, the incentive to do well on a Regents could be if it helps your grade, it gets factored in. So that could be if you have an 80 or 90 and you do really well on the Regents, that could be used to bring up your grade. But if you're a struggling 70 student and you bomb a Regents, and that could make you fail a course, that's like, we're fighting to do better for kids. I don't think a standardized Regents for all kids is doing better for kids. And again, I fought, and I've sat here all the time, our teachers know best how to know and test our kids. our teachers know much better than New York State how to test our kids. And you asked Mike what the money is, like, is it a money incentive? Yeah, every kid that takes a regent, somebody's making money. And that's why if a kid takes 3 or 4 regents, they're making 3 or 4 times the money. So if you follow the money, the regents isn't about making better students. It's about making somebody money, and it's not us.
Meredith?
One more thing that I wanted to bring to your attention is the children who are in high school now, they don't really know how to take standardized tests, most of them. If you think about it, they were the elementary kids that kind of started the opt-out movement. So there's a lot of these kids that have not taken standardized testing their whole life. And then all of a sudden we hit the pandemic, and then they were said, okay, you don't have to take them. And then we threw them into it. It's way too much on their shoulders, and in a world where there's already so much on their shoulders. You know, I think that to tell them that, you know, we're saying it could affect their grade by a few points, it could affect their grade by more than a few points. Some of these kids are looking to get into colleges, and that might be the 89 or the 90, where a college might accept them with a 90, but not going to accept them with an 89. And for us to do that to our own children is horrible. And the geometry regents, that's a great point, because that wasn't just Sachem. That was the entire state. So we're saying that we're going to take this regents that might be completely skewed. And I know people all over the state that said, my kid didn't learn that. My kid didn't learn that.
Exactly.
There were trick questions. So we're going to take this and we're going to count it towards 10% against our children on things that they may not have learned, on things that may be trick questions, on things that are completely out of our control, on things that our educators had no control over. And that's not fair at all. And I believe that the children who are going to be conscientious about their studies are going to be. And I think that your data from last year, respectively, have to tell you is completely skewed. 1, because of the bad geometry regents. 2, because most of these kids never took a regents before, and now it was their first time ever getting one. And 3, because they're all still a little messed up from the pandemic. So I do have to argue that I think it's completely skewed data.
Any other comments? I mean, I'll weigh in on this whole thing. I always wait till the end. You know, the recommendation on the floor is to have a no harm policy for students with IEPs. What the superintendent's recommending. I know firsthand, I've seen it even in my own program, is that when you don't hold kids accountable, right, they start to slide. Right? I saw it in my own program. Right? I gave a final exam in my program that had 5 days of practical assessment and 1 day of written assessment that had 100 questions on it. And if I didn't express to them, okay, that it had a value, okay, of 20%, our school counts it as literally a fifth quarter, the kids would not have risen to the occasion. If I said, you know what, it doesn't really matter how you do on this, okay, it really doesn't, but do your best, I guarantee the results would have been lower. And in the case of algebra regents and geometry regents, aren't those exams weighted? Are they weighted, or is
They're scored on a scale. There is a scale, yeah.
So in given years, what's the weighted passing rate? I have heard, like, sometimes when they weight the exam, 33 sometimes is passing.
It can be, but if you think about like the algebra regents, for example, and we talk about this a lot as a staff, modifying curriculum, et cetera, for students with special needs, for example, or our ENL students. In order for you to pass the exam, you don't need to know the entire curriculum. You only need to know a percentage of the curriculum, depending on the scale and depending on what it is that they see for that year. So it is obviously a system that's flawed. And I think it's worthy for us to look into it further, starting with our data. And I would even suggest that we should look prior to the pandemic just to see what those scores were like by school, which we do obviously have.
But we know some subject areas are flawed automatically. I mean, the geometry regions every year is low.
Every year.
So there's a problem with that exam.
Yeah, the physics, algebra 2. I mean, those are notoriously pretty hard regents exams for our students, for any student.
So the second part I think that we need to look at too is that, and look, I speak to a lot of teachers. Teachers want a final assessment, whether it's a final exam or it's a Regents exam, they want to be able to test the knowledge of a student. They don't want to spend 180 days and then say, well, it doesn't really matter how you do on it, because then you don't really ascertain what knowledge was actually taught and learned. You know, our Regents exam actually counts towards our teacher's APPR score. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So if we say, hey, you know what, they don't count, or you're not required, or you could opt out of it. Okay, what does that do to our teachers' APPR scores? Doesn't it put them into a TIPS program if they score below a certain level in the Heidi score? If the kids perform poorly on the exam, doesn't that mean that our teachers, it reflects their ability to be able to teach the program and be able to have a certain level of understanding?
So the APPR plan has certain regions that are counted and included in that, and the scores will impact teachers and principals in the event that there are low scores.
All right, so we would have to change our APPR plan and resubmit that to the state that say, hey, you know what? Next year we're not going to use the Regents exam for an APP score. We're going to create our own local final exams, and we're going to be able to do that and use that. Is that
There are a few things, because we do take a look at like a 10-year look back when we look at our Regents scores as well. But ultimately, if it was a situation that we were impacting Regents scores and it's in our plan, we would want to be mindful of that for our teachers and for our administrators, our principals.
So I don't necessarily have a problem with amending it this year. For the recommendation is for students with IEPs, and leaving the 10% in place, and then moving forward to change it down the road. Because the reality of it is look, we're preparing students for the real world. You know, whether you want to be a fireman, a teacher, a police officer, you want to be a ticket person on the railroad, you have to take an exam. You have to take an exam. And when you get to that level, you're not going to be able to, apply for those positions and want to do those things without getting a certain score in those exams. So I hate to just throw them out completely. If we could modify them this year, and I don't know where the whole board is on this, but modify them this year and then maybe look down, next year at changing it when we have enough time to change it. But, the decision that we make tonight, if we make a decision where we say, no, it would not counting at all, how do we calculate final scores? How do we calculate APPR scores? How do we do a lot of that stuff by making this decision as is? Right now, if we say students with IEPs, it's not going to count. It's a no harm policy for students with IEPs, but next year moving forward, at least we don't have to count those students towards those particular scores. There are times when a student doesn't show up for final exam and we put a no grade, which means it doesn't count towards an APPR score. So how would we address those things before we make a decision? I would ask,
If I could just make a suggestion, if we're having that conversation, can we also consider our ENL students? Because they too suffer, and I'm not suggesting that I agree or not. I'm just saying if that's on the table.
Well, can I, because I have my hands up. The state's recommending that we don't do this.
No, the state's also, Stephanie, is requiring that the Regents exams count towards
I
an
understand
APPR.
that. I understand what
Okay,
you're
so you
saying.
can't say,
no,
well, we're
I'm
not
not trying to
required to
argue.
apply,
I'm
we're gonna-
bringing this up just for clarity. So, why are we requiring it when it's optional for other school districts throughout the state to do it? Why is
It's
Sachem
optional
requiring
for
it?
it's optional for every district. We and many others have decided to attach a percentage to it to calculate a student's final grade because we feel it's important.
And if we feel these tests are not true to what our students are learning, why use that as a measure instead of a test that we've created? Like you give your students, no one's saying not measure the students what they've learned throughout the year. No, I don't think anyone's saying not give them any kind of end of class evaluation. You're giving a test that you taught your students. We're relying
one
on
of the
other
three,
people
yes.
to write a test on things that might not have been taught to our students, like with what happened with the geometry.
So our technical Regents endorsement exam is a national exam that's written by a whole magnitude of teachers across the United States. It's actually given through NOCTI, which is a testing certification company. We also give our students a National Restaurant Association Serve Safe exam that's really designed for managers in restaurants, and they're learning high level sanitation and microbiology. So the thing is that, can we provide testing modifications with approval from those testing committees? Absolutely. But if a kid wants that 5-year certificate to make them more employable to work in that restaurant, they have to get a 7-year higher on it.
So is there an
So-
option to have people apply for an accommodation even if they don't have an IEP or a 504?
No, they wouldn't grant it. No. You would have to have
See,
it, and
but
it has to be
then-
done
Then
in
we're not
advance.
equitable. And then if we do ENL students, like where the struggle, who defines who's struggling, and does that then force everyone to get their kid an IEP or a 504 accommodation?
I just want to remind everybody too that it's still in our teacher's APPR plan.
Yeah, we can't,
So
that's what I'm saying.
I'm
And
just
the
saying, I
kids-
don't
and
know
they
if you could
still
just
need
do
it
it this
for
year. I think there
graduation.
needs
We
to be
have
some
to get
thoughtful.
it, right?
Yeah,
They
and
have to.
I'm
they have
talking
to
about
take
the
it.
optional. It's twofold. It's whether it goes into, not saying not to have them take it, but also whether it shows up on their transcript, whether it's factored into their final grade for the kids that are struggling to pass but are working their butt off and then get hit with this test that they bomb. And then are we going to force children into the special ed section of Sachem just to get the accommodation? Because there's tons of kids in our district that should probably have accommodations and don't have them. So do we start that wave?
Yeah, I'd be very cautious with that. We are one of the highest percentage districts in terms of providing accommodations already.
Meredith?
When's the last Regents this year?
Probably the 22nd.
22nd.
Anyway, we can table this and decide after everybody's taken it so that the kids don't know whether we're leaning one way or the other. They take their Regents the way that they should be taking their Regents. We table this discussion, and just before, maybe we can have
Our
an
next meeting is the
emergency
27th.
meeting for it.
Yeah. So we could do one of two things. The recommendation from the superintendent is to have a no harm policy for students with IEPs that struggle. Look, the resolution that was submitted to Nisba is to give kids an option. We always want to challenge kids to do really well and challenge themselves. But if they're unsuccessful, okay, in reaching that goal, they have something to fall back on. They can get a local diploma. We're not saying in that resolution we want to eliminate Regents altogether, although I think hopefully we get there someday so we could be like some of the other states around us. But we're saying that we give kids an option. Superintendent's recommending that we have no harm policy that wouldn't count towards teachers' APPR. Okay, if that's possible, would you put it as a no grade?
You'd have to remove those students from the overall information that we provide to the state.
Yeah.
Again, I do believe that we can do that. I spoke to Mr. Miller about that today. We can look at the transcript and do this calculation and make sure we're not harming anybody. It is June 14th. Even if we had this discussion on June 7th, it's late in the year. We did have this discussion, I recall, a few months ago when we said we were going to have this 10% policy, and at that point, we did move forward and do that. So I know the request was to revisit it, but it is very late in that game.
Alex, and then we'll come back over.
I just have a few things because I've been waiting. First, I wanted to acknowledge Nurse Kate. She's the last person standing in the audience tonight. So great job. Class of 02. Second, I despise I despise the Regents and everything that they stand for. And my concern on the, out of the same side of my mouth is that we are creating a world where we are removing all obstacles and making things easier for kids. And are we setting them up for future failures? That's my concern. And whether it is part of the Regents or not, I just want to make sure that we're challenging them, that we have the abilities with our own staff to create challenges and not just finals, but just coursework in general, because the world is crumbling before us. And I don't know if anybody else is noticing this, but it's deteriorating. And I want to make sure it's not our fault, I think the Regents is a huge problem, but as part of local control, I'd love to tell the state to go stick it and you can have your test back. But, they don't, we're not consistent when we talk to them. We bend for them constantly. So I hear what everybody's saying, and I don't want to hurt anybody, but at the same side, I do think they need to be challenged. So maybe those same classes that we're giving those Regents, that they take a week or two before they take a final, and we can use that instead. But we have to do something. We can't just completely eliminate everything for them.
Laura?
And just quickly, I don't agree with eliminating. I wanted my son to be pushed. You know, he was supposed to go into life skills. I wanted him where he was pushed. But I'm just saying, if we look at it, if you do well and it can help you, that's great. But if it is so beyond you that you get a 30 on a weighted Regents, but you tried and you did everything during the school year, I don't believe that that 30 should be added into your final grade. That's the point I'm trying to make. For some people, it's just difficult to take a Regents. Doesn't mean they didn't do all their classwork. Doesn't mean they didn't take tests that their teacher gave them that they succeeded on. Just means that the Regents is not something that their brain, based on how it is, because now I can't do things I used to. So I can honestly say, no matter how hard I try, there are things I'll never be able to do again. So that's what we're putting kids through. And that's it.
No, so I like what you just said. You said something which was interesting, which was maybe you do a final exam first and the Regents, and then you can compare, and maybe it's the higher of the two, right? Because again, I believe in challenging kids, and I agree, right? You know, you've got to push them, you've got to challenge them, right? Because the real world is going to challenge the hell out of it, right?
But we
So
would have
maybe
to,
there's
we would have to change that, Vinny.
it's not for this year. This year the ship has sailed, right? I mean, I don't, you know, this, like you said, it's June 14th, right? But going forward, maybe it's got to be, you got to rethink it. Maybe there is an opportunity to do a final and the Regents, and then you can evaluate, right? So just a thought, something
But then
maybe
they
to
still
look
have to
into.
take the Regents and pass it for graduation.
Right.
We're advocating for that to change. So we
Right.
can't change that. This is really for the children that want to take a Regents level course, already have their graduation requirements, but want to push themselves.
Right, but we're having, like, that's what I'm saying. I think the conversations are intertwining right now, and it's confusing me.
And if I understand
because
this
the student,
correctly-
I don't want it to hurt their grade, but they, you know, algebra. And again, I'm not okay with the system, but this is what system we're in.
Right.
And the reality is that if you're taking, like, my son's taking the algebra Regents tomorrow, you know, if he doesn't pass that Regents, he needs that he's going to have to take that Regents again. You know, so that's like, it's this double-edged sword here. Like,
And I
what are we
agree with them
doing?
taking it 2 or 3 times.
Right.
What I disagree with
Is failing the course.
because of a
that.
Regents. That's what I disagree with.
Can we?
And the Regents doesn't have to be on.
Yeah.
Can we have data on how many kids we failed because of this? Like, are we seriously putting a kid at a 63 all of a sudden?
Right.
because of-
I think it's a
Is
great.
that, well, the question is that happening?
I think that's a great point. I'm surmising that I don't believe that many kids fail a course because they failed the Regents. I would think that if they're passing throughout the year, again, that 10%, which is one of 6 components that make up their final, I think it's a low enough number of the impact that it wouldn't fail them for the year. But it's something we can look
And we
at.
would gather as an administration, the teachers, don't you guys have meetings, like if the kid is right on the borderline and we are not sending a kid to summer school because of a point or two, because we created a policy that failed them?
No.
Guidance counselors review any student that is like that comes back after Regents. They will directly, even if the teachers are out, they will get in touch with the teachers.
What about it impacting their transcript for colleges that they're looking into? That's another concern. Yes, failure is always a concern, but then you don't want it bringing kids' grade down to a point where they're not considered for their dream school just because the Regents harm them.
So what goes on the transcript, there are certain aspects of it that we control. And so again, not at this late hour or date or moment would I say, let's just riff off the top of our head how to change that. But let's bring some people together that would sit down and we can then come up with a template that we'd share with the board and the community that says, this is what's going to be a SACHM, just like the SACHM graduate, portrait of a graduate. This is what a SACHM transcript will mean, and this is what it will look like. And might there be differentiation amongst students depending on IEP, no IEP, E&L, or no E&L? Perhaps we could do something like that.
Can we look at what other districts do in highly successful school districts to see if maybe they have a policy that's actually enhancing their kids' transcripts?
Highly successful school districts.
So like
Are
the
you
ones that
intimating
everybody's
that?
jealous
Oh,
about.
yeah. Are you intimating that we're not highly
No,
successful
I'm
school
saying we're
districts,
highly
Stephanie?
successful. I'm just saying maybe our transcripts show we're less
Right.
successful and they're making themselves look better because they're utilizing the fact that you don't have to use
I got to tell you,
the regents as the final grade.
I don't know of a single district that necessarily does that on their transcripts. Patty, you have some experience with this too, and Aaron,
I have
right?
to be honest with you. If you look at like a Jericho, a Manhasset, any of those, I guess what you're referring to.
Sachem.
Sachem, my own husband's school districts, they are not for Regents testing, but they are for ensuring that the students and all the hard work that they've done, AP courses, like that's what they're putting on their transcript. Can we, of course, look at a transcript and not put certain grades? Yeah, absolutely. But we also don't want to present a student to a college necessarily who may have struggled, but because of that one particular assessment, now it looks like they did better than what they did. We also don't want to put a child in a position where they may have just gotten along and that Regents just really tanked them, but they still just kind of got along in those courses, right? So we have to think about the child too.
I'm sorry, Meredith.
I have a math question because this is beyond me, but if a child has a 65 average every quarter and then they get a 33 on the Regents, what would their final average, what would their final grade be? Because if you did it as a regular average, it brings them from a 65 to a 58.6, but we don't do it as a regular one. We only count it as 10%. So how do we do that math?
I'm going to wait for Sabrina to finish this from
Yeah.
the math teacher.
So 65.
If they had a 65
times
all 4 quarters,
260 points.
right? Then they got a 33 on the Regents.
Okay. So that would be 3.3 points, which is only 10%. Okay. So that.
So what would it?
What they get on a midterm?
What they?
Or we're saying just
65, right? Walking
With a
into the final, they have a
65.
65 average for the whole year.
So that's 90% of their grade.
So what would?
So that's like 58.
It brings them down to
And
58.
then 33, so it would bring it like a 61, and then at that point.
So it brings them to failing.
At that point, right? But at that point, we all have teacher discretion at that
Yeah,
point.
I was going to say that.
And I know for me, if a child, I believe, really put in the effort and they struggled and whatnot, you are going. And again, it's just you're looking at the child holistically at that point and saying, you know what, this kid really worked hard. They put in the effort, just didn't make it. We're going to give them. And that's what I said. It's real. That's why I want to see the data because I'm curious to how many students this really affected. And I like how we look at prior to COVID to now, and then look at that data and go from there. Because I think we're also having a lot of conversations, but how many kids is this impacting? And if it's a small percentage of kids, it's impacting ENL special ed and maybe a few regular education students that maybe we're like, okay, we'll look at those kids on a need be basis instead of this whole district wide, policy. And that's, the beauty of having teacher discretion. We have no discretion on the Regents, but I have discretion when it comes to my students.
Okay, I didn't realize
So
that.
just to
I mean,
piggyback
I'm
on
assuming
what-
that's the case here too.
What Sabrina was saying, I had a youngster that was not going to move on to the next level. He needed a certain score on his final exam. He needed a certain score on his fourth quarter grade. And, there's certain things we look at. We went back and we looked at his attendance and said, hey, you know what? These 3 days really shouldn't have counted against you because, you had a baseball game in Bridgehampton, which pulled you out of school and it was an excused absence. And by the way, here's 2 other things. I want you to work on this assignment and I'm going to make up one of those other zeros. So that 61 easily becomes a 65 again. Okay. And now all of a sudden that student, passes. We have that discretion. Teachers have that discretion to be able to do that. But what's the most frustrating thing as an educator is that, look, I give it a national assessment in my class in order for the kids to be able to transition into the kitchen to be able to work. And it's a requirement because we want to make sure that they understand sanitation before they start cooking food for people. And it's frustrating when I have 2 kids, one who's an IEP student that struggles in school and a kid that clearly could pass his exam. And the kid with the IEP comes in with index cards and clearly has been studying and working hard to pass it. And the kid that really, should have no problem passing it fails the exam. But that IEP kid gets an 85 on it. When you challenge kids, okay, and it's important to them to be able to do it, they rise to the occasion. And I think that's what a non-Regents diploma would come in, is that kid that really struggles, that's not their fault, has something to fall back on. I think it's important. The minute you take accountability away, kids 30th out. Look, my daughter has, I don't want to embarrass her, but she's like 102 GPA right now. If I said to her, it's an option, you don't have to, the Regents doesn't count, what do you think she would do? Even 102 G, she wouldn't take it. She'd say, all right, I'm not going to do well on it. I don't care. And that's what's going to happen. So I think you have to hold kids accountable to a certain level. I think it's important to, like what Alex said, we don't want to, contribute bad things to society. We want kids to be able to work and understand the fundamentals. Because, look, I mean, I've seen many times where kids struggle, and then they find their way at 21, 22, 23, and they excel. They do amazing things. So, I mean, I think what's on the table right now is Dr. Pelletier, you're saying that we can maybe suspend, Regents exams for students with IEPs, and somebody said ENL as well,
Yeah.
possibly.
No.
Oh,
Yeah,
IE
just be careful with the language we're using. Yeah.
IEP.
No. You said suspend the Regents exams.
No.
So they're
No.
definitely
Not count the Regents exams as a 10%.
we would not apply the 10% to those students with an IEP who take the Regents, right? They would take the Regents unless it helps.
Unless it helps.
Okay.
That gives them the incentive to do well.
I need to go back and make sure that we can do that. There are classes, I don't know what indicator, Patty or Aaron, what indicator is going to be in there for the teacher that says, I know they have their IEP direct, right? Are they going to have to look at all 34 kids in their class and say, okay, this one I'm going to put in a new calculation into eSchool?
Yes,
Or is that
Becker can do
something
that
we
though.
can
If
do?
there's no region score, then it just defaults to the 4 quarters.
Okay, and the
Right.
midterm, right?
Right. If you're asking about the APPR though, that obviously, is something that Kristen would have to kind of go through each exam and see, because if a teacher doesn't have a score, my understanding is that they can get a district score then.
Child would
We have like a few
the student would
topics
still
all
take-
intertwined in this.
The student would still take the test and there still would be a score and it still could be reported. It doesn't need to be impacted at all.
Yes, no matter what, if a child takes a Regents exam, the score has to be sent up to the state.
Yep.
We don't necessarily,
And
which is what it states in regulations, we
Mhm.
don't have to count it in
Right.
our scoring in terms of, a final score exam. So
But
we do have
could still
autonomy
count
in
it for
that.
APPR.
But we can still count it for APPR, correct?
So we'll have to, we're going to meet with my director. We're going to meet as a team and we're going to flesh this out and figure this out and go back, and I will then alert the board and the community as to how we're going to do with this for students with IEPs.
You're okay
Does
with
that make sense?
Yeah, just a quick question. Are there different levels of IEPs? Maybe
Yeah,
education? Right.
without a doubt. I might have an emotional disability and someone else might have an intellectual
So you're
disability.
saying it's sort of blanket across the board, everybody, or are they just
So
for, or for certain
that-
IEPs?
That's
versus
part of the,
others?
yeah, that's the issue. That's the crux of what we're talking about here. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about across. That's what makes it very difficult, and especially at this hour. You could recommend that we do something like this in the fall and start on it very early, and ask for something by January so we know specifically what we're doing.
Dr. Pelletier, can I just make a suggestion? Because I just hesitate to make a decision this late in the game. If there's particular cases of students who, families feel quite concerned about, perhaps we can start there by looking at those students individually and then give us some time to really sit down over the summer. And as you said, come up with a template, look at the transcript, look at the final score
How
exam.
would we disseminate that, Erin? How would we adjudicate that, so to speak? We would tell parents, if your child has an IEP and they struggled on the Regents, let us know, and we'll look
No,
at their.
I'm not really aware of any parents at this time other than,
No, there'll be others, I'm sure, that would say, I'd
There
like to
may.
apply that
Sure.
policy to my child.
Right. But in this late stage of the game, I don't know how you go through so many students and say, you can have it, you can't have it. I just, that's what I'm just
Yeah, that's
struggling with
the
a little bit.
concern that I have as
Yeah.
well. Mhm.
And I apologize if I'm out of line. This is a huge decision, more than just a light conversation tonight.
Stephanie, and then we'll come back to Laura.
Okay.
My concern is the kids that are going to fall through the cracks, that their parents aren't watching this meeting
Mhm.
and they're not going to advocate for their kid. The kids that have medical conditions that impact their test taking ability, and all of that. I also think that it's under the gun because we are at the end of the school year and we're in the middle of kids starting to take Regents. So is there a way that we can have parents just ask for this accommodation for now don't make an official position on it, and then we'll fix it next year.
Simple solution. When Michael took the Regents, every teacher called me. He got a 33. He got this. Don't worry, have him take it over the summer. Every teacher in our building with their guidance counselors knows the kids that are going to be affected in a negative way. I trust those teachers with my child's life. Can't we trust those teachers to say by counting this at 10%, this kid is going to fail the class? Can we do the do no harm policy? Like, our teachers are the ones that I want testing our kids, not the regents. You know what I mean? To me, it's as simple as that.
If, in fact, applying the 10% rule causes a student to fail, we don't apply the 10% rule across the board.
Yes, but remember the past couple of years we didn't have APPR, and I am the first to wish that was not intertwined in it, but now it does. So we have to give more thought to just saying you can have a choice.
They must take the test.
They must take the test, and I think we just need to double check that it's fine.
But they're not going to know that if they get a 33, it's not going to count on their final grade. That's going to be the discussion that happens with the teacher, the parent, the student after the test.
Yes.
And again, I still think that a majority of kids that take a Regents aren't taking it to try and fail.
No, I would
You
hope
know
not.
what I mean?
Yes, of course.
Like, so I think we're lumping a lot of kids in that are not succeeding because they're not trying, because they think it's not going to count. It'll count and it'll help their grades, but if it's going to cause them harm, that to me is a teacher, the guidance counselor, the social worker. They will know who those kids are, in my opinion.
Okay, so we're at right now, you're going to get back to us, Chris, as to how you're going to be able to make this work, where it's not going to impact the APPR, and it's not going to impact, certain benchmarks.
Automatically, everyone's going to take everyone should be taking the Regents.
So the question is, what happens if a kid doesn't take the Regents? How does that get calculated into their final?
We want them obviously to take it, but it would default down
To the 4 quarters. That's all.
It would default to 4 quarters.
Yeah.
So that's my
And the
question. If he
midterm.
gets COVID, he can't come in and take the Regents.
Yeah, and the
It's only given
midterm.
one day.
Mhm.
So it would not hurt.
No.
It would not hurt them.
So, Steph,
Has anyone advocated for the kids not to take the Regents? I don't think anybody was suggesting they don't take it. I think we were suggesting it doesn't harm the students after the fact.
I had a parent say my kid's not taking the Regents.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well, I mean,
yes.
that's a parental choice, but
Yeah.
as a board, I don't
I
think
just
we're
want to know
encouraging
how that
kids not
impacts
to
the
take
kids' grade. Is what the question was.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that would
Yeah.
be the best.
Sabrina?
So can we just get that data that we've requested and maybe even look into, in the future, the midterm counting more, maybe, because it is, like what's the midterm, 5%? That maybe we flop it where that's 10%. It's a shorter period of time, your local assessment. So just the data that you gave, we could have different discussions around making it beneficial for the student and doing a no harm, but still having percentages count.
Just want to address something. So if a kid doesn't take the Regents, we're only doing it on the 4 quarters in the midterm. How is that fair to the kids who are taking it because the parent says you're not taking it? I'm not into that. You don't take it. Right now, you're going to get 0 on that. And that's going to count 10%. Right? Why are we giving parents the ability to say,
Unless Stephanie asked if anybody advocated for the
Right.
kid not to take it. We had a
because then we're
parent.
going to have them lining up saying we're not taking this, and then we're
But
just.
they
gonna get the
needed to
4 quarters.
graduate.
All right, just want to make
So,
sure there's
yeah,
some sort of
they
ramifications.
need
to
the
that
Regents to
at this
graduate, or they
point, so
can't
it's
get a
fair,
diploma.
right?
We
The
can
only person who
also
could
give
really-
them an incomplete and make them take the makeup Regents over the summer. The only time in the history that we've, as high schools, have excused a child from taking the Regents and not counting it is if it was a medical reason.
Sabrina, can I just make sure I'm on the same page with you?
Yeah, what data?
I'm going to do a history of the midterms and finals and/or Regents prior to the pandemic, through the pandemic, so we can see the no harm policy if there was an effect, and then following this Regents, what that looks like as well.
Right,
Correct?
just looking at how many kids who failed the Regents where it impacted their grade, where then they failed the course.
Okay.
To that point where we're looking at that, how many kids did that truly impact? Are we talking about hundreds, or are we talking about 20, like 10 or 20? Then we're really going to have the discussion of, again, teacher discretion in terms of that course, and I would assume they would benefit the child if they believe the child worked hard enough throughout the year but fell short when it came to that final assessment. Do you have that data where you could see these kids who failed the Regents and it caused them to fail for the year?
Okay, and I do think it's good for us to see a snapshot of grades overall.
Absolutely.
By department during the pandemic as well, because that really was where we started with our data team meetings, to just kind of see where we were prior, during the pandemic, and where we need to kind of regain some traction again, not with the Regents necessarily, but just making sure students were back on track and really working towards, standards
Right.
and everything. Okay.
And moving forward, the other thing, and maybe it's a future discussion item, is do we want to look at revamping our APPR plan so that we're not using Regents exams as a determination as to our teacher success? Do we want to resubmit a plan that says, hey, you know what, we're going to create local exams, and that's what we're going to use as a benchmark to see that kids are making annual progress in the curriculum. Yes, I think you are.
There are. It has to be approved.
Yes.
And it's hard to get a local assessment in Mr. Reynolds' class to be proven scientifically valid and reliable, whereas the Regents, they do have data that says it's valid and reliable. So that would be, I'd love to change
It's not
APPR.
impossible,
APPR is being,
It also has to be negotiated with both the SCTA and the SAA.
So then we need to find out whether or
And-
not, is that a better approach, and would they be amenable to something
Right.
like that?
We have to look at the criteria and what we can do under state ed law and 3012D, as well as that, so we can, continue with the negotiations. And then once we get to something, we get to that point, then it would have to be approved through state ed. We do have a contact person. We have been in contact with them over the last number of months. And we do have a tickler on to speak with them in July, which is in a matter of a couple weeks.
And there's
Sure.
some discussion right now about APPR going away, I think, too.
Oh, we're waiting for that shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Can we include that in our Nisba resolutions and tied with the Regents? Like, Mike, you want to write that resolution? No, we were just talking about with, supporting APPR.
yeah, revise and edit the APPR plan for more local control. So, wait, Laura, what am I doing? I'm going to come back on the 21st, which is a week from tonight, with a plan.
Whether or not it's even feasible for the
Yep. Okay.
And that would be for students with IEPs.
So I'll look at it globally and see if we can make a final recommendation.
Last item on here is Mascot resolution. Dr. Peltieri.
I'm going to ask Chris Venator to speak to this. This is not a moment in time to debate necessarily our mascot, our logos, anything like that. We have been directed by the state before July 1 to pass a resolution as a board that states that if the state tells us we are not meeting the regulation regarding mascot and logo use, that we will, over the next, I think it's till 2025, work to make the changes necessary to meet those guidelines. Chris, am I surmising that correctly?
Yeah, each district has to, by July 1, to adopt a resolution outlining a particular plan for the elimination of certain mascots. So we have to adopt a resolution and talk about the timing of when we're going to do certain things, when we're going to change our facilities or et cetera. And it has to be done by the end of the 24-25 school year.
So I've seen several of these from other districts similarly situated. And essentially they say, if directed by NYSED to amend, edit our mascot or logo, we will do so by the time, the regulation requires, which I think is the end of the 24-25 school year.
Correct.
That's what's being asked of us tonight.
Yes.
Not what we want or what we like or anything, just like we don't have to have that whole piece now, but we have to have that resolution and then a plan. So that's part of the discussion as well. what would that plan look like? We'd make a committee. We would talk with the community members. We would come up with art or language or something along those lines that we would submit again to, there's an agency called the Mascot Advisory Board, and we would submit the information to them after we met as a community and make the changes as necessary to meet the regulation. That's what we're being asked to essentially do on the 21st.
Yes, we have to adopt a very simple resolution, just outlining a plan. And you talk about the need to budget for whatever changes you need to make in terms of your logo.
But we don't know what that budget would
Hey, excuse me,
entail
Dr.
now.
Pelletier, just,
Yeah.
you guys are saying two different things, because you're saying if directed, and it sounds like Chris is saying we have to do something. So what do we actually have to do?
So we have
'Cause
to
you're
pass
saying
the
if
resolution.
directed by the state to change something,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And you're saying we have to change it. So that's
Oh,
I'm hearing two different things.
Okay. Chris, are you saying we have, what I'm saying tonight is we should discuss the potential for a resolution that would be on the board agenda on the 21st, saying if directed. I'm saying if directed by the state. I'm not going to assume anything at this point. We'd have to speak with, again, or put in our logo and our mascot, from what I understand, to this advisory board, and they would advise us as to whether or not we're meeting that regulation. So that would come from state, from that board, not from us.
Yeah, I just don't know if we've already been told.
We haven't been told.
We haven't been told. So yeah, we can couch it in the.
Yeah, I
first
haven't
instance.
received anything from anyone at NYSED, Mascot Advisory Board, anything that we need to do anything. The regulation even states that you have to self-regulate, that you have to make this decision yourself. And so I'm going to argue that we're being directed to do this, obviously, and have not been told by any entity that we need to change anything.
I think together we can come up with a resolution that does both those things. If directed by the state, these are the things that we will have to do, and this is the time frame by which we will do it.
First, I'm a no on the resolution. I'm not going to be part of it at all. Second, we had our president of our alumni association foil over the last 20 plus years anything from New York State, from SCD, any correspondence to Sachem, and nothing ever named us in the last 20 years to say that we've been asked, it was requested, they would like us to, anything along those lines. So I don't believe we fall in that category, and I believe that we should write another letter to them and say we were never given the same time frame everybody else was, and because of that, we have now contacted an Indian nation and received permission, like everybody else had the opportunity to, that we never got to, and we were able to take those steps, and they have a taxpayer money waste of a commission that they put together. And they're not talking about giving us any of the money to change anything. So we're not going to be, or we should not be party to anything that they're asking us to do right now. And I don't think passing a resolution saying that we're going to do whatever you say, because that's what you want, when we've written them about masks, we've written them about local control, we've passed these Nisba resolutions by our board, we've done a lot for them, and they never do anything in return. And I don't think we should start here. I really don't. This is a community of rich history and tradition and respect. And I really think that this, and I hear you, Chris, and I understand what your recommendation is going to be. It's going to be on the uber conservative side of, kneeling to Zod and doing what they ask. But I just don't think we should go there. That's one of 9, but I really don't think we should go there.
But we have Alex, we have a commission's regulation that says that we have to adopt a resolution, right? So and the failure to do so could lead to a number of bad consequences. One of which is, in the regs, it allows people in your community to bring an appeal to the commissioner. So you could get that. You could potentially lose state aid if you ultimately don't adhere to the regulation. So at the very least, I think we need to adopt a resolution. We could talk about contingencies in that resolution. For instance, I'll give you a wild hypothetical, and I'm not advocating for this. Wild hypothetical, the board at some point says, you know what, for this reason and that reason, we think that we should challenge this determination by the Board of Regents and we're going to bring some sort of legal action. I mean, you could incorporate some of that in your resolution saying, on the condition that, this regulation is not overturned as being beyond the scope and authority of the Board of Regents. So if you want to put something in there that gives you the ability, perhaps we can look at that. But you at least, in my opinion, should adopt a resolution that meets the spirit of adopting a resolution.
But we're passing a resolution that says when we are directed, we will do what you say. Now, if it really came down to last minute, couldn't we just do what they ask last second and make the change when we're directed instead of doing this resolution that says, a year or two from now when your commission wastes enough taxpayer money and you guys make a decision, then we'll do what you say.
But I think the problem is the implementation of this, if you go forward and do it, in terms of removing logos from your gym floors and, that's going to take time, that's going to take money, that's going to take planning. That's not something you could wait to the last moment for. You have to plan for that. So, if something changes and let's say, there are entities out there that are school districts that are going to challenge this, they may or may not be successful, probably not, but who knows? But if they're not successful at the end of the day, you're going to be legally required to change, certain logos and mascots, et cetera. And I don't know any way around adopting as a first step, but at least adopting a resolution.
But I thought one of the directives that we received was that anything pre-existing could stay. I thought that directive was clear that we already received that we didn't have to change anything on the fields or the courts or the banners or anything that was already there could stay. And then when it was time to replace the turf or the uniforms or this, then we would have to that was my understanding that we received that notice.
No, it's not true. That's not what the commission's regulation
I think
said.
that was more towards awards and trophies and things like that we may have
Yes.
in like showcases and halls of honor and things like that, right?
I think that was the initial feedback that we got from the state, is that you wouldn't have to do it until turf needed to be changed. But I think what happened was they aggressively changed it and said, no, it has to be done by 2025. So I think there was some discussion that was leading towards that.
All right, that was the last I heard. I didn't hear that last part, or I didn't want to hear it.
Stephanie?
Who directed the Alumni Association to get involved in this and speak on behalf of the board? Because we didn't. And then we contacted the Indian Nation because that was suggested, but we never voted on that either. So I want to clarify what Alex just said, because I don't want the community to think we directed anybody to do this, and we definitely didn't meet with any nation.
No, we didn't direct anybody to do anything, but any person has a right to foil anything. So, a person took it upon themselves to foil the state to see whether or not Sachem was ever mentioned or Sachem was ever, charged with changing anything over the years from our logo. It wasn't.
That wasn't directed by the board.
It was not directed by the board. Anybody could do that.
Right, I understand that, but
Yeah.
you said we directed
No,
him
no,
to do
no.
that.
No, he didn't say that.
Yes,
we
he
did it.
did. I wrote it down when he said it. That's why I'm asking
He
this
said our
question.
alumni association.
We
president-
directed our alumni association to foil, is exactly what he said. We can play it
Well,
back, and we did not. That's why I'm just
Well,
asking.
we can play it back. We're not going to play it back here
No,
live.
no, no, I'm not asking. I'm
yeah.
not arguing. I
Yeah.
want to make it clear to the
Yeah. No,
community
nobody-
that the board didn't direct
Nobody
that.
directed.
And we didn't meet with an Indian Nation. I don't know if
We didn't
the
meet with
alumni
them. We
association
didn't
did, but
contact
we
the
didn't.
nation. Once again, anybody has a right to do that,
Yeah, I will.
Didn't we ask Dr. Pelletier
Yes,
to
you
reach
did.
out to a local?
Yes, and I
Indian
did
nation? Right.
on 3 different occasions, which I memorialized because
Right.
I left messages.
And there's no response.
And I haven't had a response.
Yeah, but we didn't
You
direct
didn't
that.
meet
We
with
didn't
them.
direct anybody not related to the district to do that.
Steph, I encourage you to go back and watch the video because I didn't say what you think. We could argue back and forth, but we're
Again,
not
I
gonna
could have
agree, but-
misheard. I'll watch it again, no problem. I just want to be clear because I heard that. So if I've mistaken, that's fine. I will amend that. But I did hear that we
No, I said
directed.
the Alumni Association.
Okay.
Chris, I have a question. Can we, I understand what you're saying about adopting a resolution, but can we go back to the state and say, look, this is our logo. We're gonna modify the logo, maybe go back to the way it was in the 80s where there wasn't feathers hanging off it, but we still have an arrowhead. We could still be the Sachem Arrows. Would that be acceptable? Prior to going and changing everything, is that something that we can do to appeal to the state to say, look, this is our logo. This is what it was in the 80s. This is what we want to present. We still aren't even the arrows. It's not derogatory. Is that something that we have the ability to do? Is there anything part of that statute that allows us to be able to appeal?
It seems to be quite limited in our ability to do that.
Chris, my understanding is we are, as we go down this path, we are to submit to this mascot advisory. I think it's .nysed something. And here is our mascot. We believe it passes muster. We believe it represents the rich history and a memorialization of this community. And this is what we want. This is what we feel should be our mascot. And then they, in fact, would return to us and say yay or nay, and what we would need to do to meet, if in their eyes we were or were not meeting the regulation.
Correct.
That's my understanding of how it works. So what Rob is saying is, I know, yes, at one point, because I looked at yearbooks and things like that, we've had the S in a circle, we've had the arrowhead with the S in the center, and then we've had more recently the arrowhead with the feathers coming off of it as our logo. So I guess we could certainly say mascot advisory NYSED. This is what we are saying is our mascot going forward at this point in time. Please advise us, as you see fit in terms of the regulation. Are we meeting the regulation?
Is that something that we have the ability to do?
Yeah, but I don't know that there's, once you get that decision from that entity, I don't know that there's an appeal process if you disagree with that determination, or whether that there's a give and take that takes place.
I'm going to go bring that in up and I'll come back to you.
Just because we've had so many different communications and information given, is it just the mascot? Or are we going to have to, like our flaming arrow, do we have to change floors and like?
Yes.
So they've told us that these
That
are the
FAQ,
things that we
yes.
have to change, like directly to Sachem, you have to change your flaming arrow, you have to change all your floors, have they specifically given us
Not
specific guidance?
Not
yet?
Sachem specifically.
But that's the
But
problem I have is we
they just
wanna-
identified if these things are on floors, et cetera, they're going to have to be removed.
If you read the FAQs, it almost like it was written for Sachem. I don't know if anybody took a chance. It talks about
Right.
harrowing out the terrazzo floors. So
Right, but we haven't been given directive. I know it says it there, but nobody's come to our facilities or said this is what you
I don't
have
think
to change.
I don't think they're going to do that. I think they expect us to do that.
That's correct.
But
That's
th-
my understanding of it.
There's a list that we've seen in Newsday that has consistently identified certain districts that are going to be, districts that are going to have to make changes. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, I think
media.
Newsday. I think Newsday created that list. I don't think it came from state ed, and it certainly didn't come from us. And we have not received anything directing us to do anything other than, again, the same general regulations that everybody received.
Meredith?
Can you read us, Chris, exactly what they're telling us we have to do? Because you have a bunch of unelected, unaccountable officials saying that we have to spend our taxpayer dollars unnecessarily, that we have to rip up gym floors, blah, 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 blah. So can you tell us exactly what they're telling us that they're mandating us to do tonight?
Well, I can give you as Mike, I know Mike is around, the FAQs that go through the most common questions and answers about the process.
FAQs are just questions and answers. I want to know what they are telling us, demanding us, and directing us to do tonight that we are mandated to do.
Well, we don't have to do anything tonight. We
Oh.
have to, by the end of this month, adopt a resolution.
Okay, so
implementing a
what's the
plan.
wording on that?
I don't have
Telling
I
us
don't
that we have to do
I don't
that.
have the specific statute in front of me. I can get that to you.
Right. So we're going to need that because we can't adopt any type of resolution without knowing exactly 100% what's being mandated to us and how we're supposed to be wasting our tax dollars.
That was sent to us, wasn't it?
Yeah, so
It was emailed.
it's something called Commissioners Regulation Part 123.
Yeah.
And Mike, there's probably about a 12-page FAQ.
Right. It's an
That's-
FAQ, but
but
what
it's-
is being like?
There's a regulation that's behind it.
The reso needs
Yeah.
to say that when they tell us exactly what to do, we will do everything that they tell us to do, and we'll keep our mouths shut and we won't
But-
fight back, and that's what it says.
But why would we, I mean, it has to stop someplace. We have to take a stand at some point and stop allowing them the people who have no accountability, who are not elected by anyone, continue to tell us that they will take away our tax money. They'll take away our aid, and they'll make us pay more in taxes and more in taxes and more in taxes if we don't do exactly what they say. What's next? Where does it end? Why, we just keep giving and giving and giving, and we're never getting anything in return. And the more we say okay, the more they're going to come back at us. So we have to stop saying okay.
Preach, Sister Meredith. Good job.
Stephanie?
Not remembering the name of the school district, and it's in the back of my head. I just can't access it. They sued and lost on this exact issue. So this is why all of this is coming to a head right now. Apparently this was started 20 years ago, and everybody kicked the can down the road and didn't take it seriously to where a school district decided we're going to fight back, and they lost even on appeal. So that's why we're dealing with this right now. And this was all explained at that dinner we went to. So how do we spend taxpayers' money fighting something that's already been fought through the courts?
How do we just roll over and say, oh, it's been fought through the courts for one instance? You don't know you can't even think of who it was. You don't know.
Well, I know who it is.
exactly.
It's in my notes, but
Right.
Okay, guys,
What-
hold
were
on,
they
hold
called
on, hold on, hold on.
Sachem? Were they
Central
called
School
arrows?
District.
One person at a time, please. Everybody will have a chance to speak. Meredith, you have the floor, and then we'll come back over here.
There's a difference between being called red men and being called arrows. And you can't just say that any school that has anything to do with any native word or language has to do away with that. So maybe that school district lost because maybe they did have a very offensive name like a red man or redskin or something like that. But I don't see an arrow as being offensive. It's not a mascot. We don't have anybody that runs around in a big arrow, and we don't have any of that.
So Rob, just to clarify this, so to your point, their name was called Indians. So to your point, right? So our flaming arrows is generic, right? So so we really need to probably get granular as to what they think is a problem with ours, right? So
Yeah, I think we need further, Alex, and then we'll come back to Laura.
Chris, is there can we find out if there is a list of meetings for this group? And are they held accountable as far as open meetings law? And are they open to the public? Can we find out anything about this? Like, are we allowed to go and speak in public comment? Is there anything along those lines?
I haven't seen anything along those lines other than going on a website and putting in information. Other than that, I don't know that there's a group that meets in public commentary and it's open to the public. I haven't seen anything like
Is
that.
it maybe that's something we could research before we have to pass this, Rezo?
I can see if there's anything available.
Thank you.
Laura?
So Chris, just quickly, this resolution that we have to pass, every school district in New York State has to pass, not just Sachem or ones that were picked out. Every district has to pass a resolution that if you're directed to change your mascot, you have to.
I'm not sure if it's every resolution, if it's every district, because there are a lot of districts have absolutely no connection whatsoever.
But who's to determine that?
I'll get you the regulation. I don't know.
You
that
know
it's
what I
every
mean?
single
Like,
district.
why are we, as Meredith's point or anybody else's point, who made the determination whose logo, like we don't have a mascot, is offensive?
Yeah.
So like, why is Sachem on that list and maybe somebody else isn't? You know what I
But Laura,
mean? Like,
here's the thing is, there's no list. We're basing it upon imagery that appeared on News 12 or CBS.
well, we had to be directed, somebody had to send to Sachem that we have to pass a resolution, right?
No, we didn't get anything.
Every district in New York State received this regulation. This regulation applies to everyone who it applies to. If in fact you have Native American imagery, this is you. That's essentially
So the
what it is.
district is,
So
so
you
we
have to
could say,
self-police.
right, so we could say we don't have that in our logo. In our logo.
I mean, technically, you could change your logo to a generic arrow.
An arrow is a
That's
tool.
not,
A flaming arrow is in the Chinese
So
culture
to
too.
that point, here's the Sachem Flaming Arrows Marching Band, right? It's a flaming arrow with a music emblem.
Right.
This should not have to be changed. This should not be subject to change.
Yeah, but you got to read.
Then
You got
you've
to read FAQs though. They talk about that may be true, but if it was historically ever
I
linked,
understand that. I've read all the
Yeah.
FAQs. all right?
Maybe we love
But then
archery.
you've got the Sachem Robotics, right? Again, they've got an arrow as well, but it's sort of the, sort of electronic symbol.
Right, or what we're looking at on the floor.
That's not, right, that's a very generic arrow. So
Right.
that's why,
Pointing up, 'cause
you
we're
know,
always in an
we have
upward
to
direction.
self-police, and again, it's in the FAQ, to your point.
So can we get more information on whether or not?
I'll give you everything I have. I don't have a lot.
I'm not sure about the
Other
FAQs.
than the regulation and the FAQs, we can contact state ed, just find out, because they give you places in the FAQs to people to contact. So we can try to do that and get more information.
I mean, even an email to that commission and say, look, isn't Arrowhead derogatory?
Right,
It's
I'm
an
just
Arrowhead.
wondering,
Yeah.
like,
Do we have to jump through the hoops if it's
right,
required?
other districts aren't going to do it because they're going to determine.
The Carl
they
Place
don't-
Frogs, where I graduated,
Yeah.
will not be doing anything to
Right,
their
so
motto. Right.
that's what I'm saying, or, so we're determining based on Newsday, putting us on the paper,
Well, I
on the
think-
list, that an arrow is Native.
Native
I'm
American
sorry, it's
imagery.
getting late.
Yep. Native American imagery. Yeah, I think it seems that is why they've put us there, and the expectation for Sachem.
Mr. Scavo, if I could, if we'll entertain it, if I can get a second, I'd like to make a motion to also put this on the executive session tonight. I have certain legal ideas I'd like to pass by the board and Mr. Venator that I won't want to do in the public session. Do I have a second on that?
You can do that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried.
I have a question. I'm sorry. I'm raising my hand for that in this. We do have some areas of the district that have Native American imagery on the walls, in the floors. So that is something, we're going to have to address this somehow because of the regulation. So if the arrowhead can get changed to a more generic arrowhead, that's an easy solution. But what about the other things in the school? Like they're saying we had to rip up floors, although that night when we went to the conversation with the commissioner, she said, one of them suggested, I forget the man's name, said that we could cover it. It didn't have to be ripped up. So there has to be a plan made to address and bring the Native American out of our imagery, correct? So what is the question now? Why do we have to keep going over this over and over and over again? Why don't we submit a more generic logo without the Native American feathers and make a plan that maybe will cover up what needs to be covered up and move on positively?
I think the direction, and correct me if I'm wrong, from the board is that we need to gather more information as to whether or not we need to change that arrowhead. All right. With regards to the Indian heads, yes, my understanding is that we can actually buy, almost like a semi-permanent sticker that you can put over the top with a generic S on it, so that we're meeting that requirement of changing those without having to rip up terrazzo floors. But I think the concern of the board is that is an arrowhead derogatory, and does it meet the same level as a red-faced cartoon Indian that some districts had? If it doesn't, why would we want to change it?
We don't have anybody to ask, though.
That's why I think at the outset, we said the resolution would say, if directed.
Yeah.
In other words, as we go through this process and we go through, hopefully, an interactive process with somebody and some entity, at the end of the day, the decision that comes down is you are directed. But so if the resolution says if directed, but if not, then if we can participate in some sort of interactive process and convince whoever it is that we need to convince that we don't need to do all that, we can do certain other things.
Yeah.
And that's why you want to keep the resolution as broad as possible and use terms like if
So
directed.
we have to do a resolution.
We got to do a resolution.
That's it, and we could word it that says if directed.
Correct. Rob.
Yeah, hold on, Meredith had a hand, and we'll come back. Alex.
Has anyone asked, I know that they've said if you get the blessing of a Native tribe, has anyone asked if the Native Americans, how they feel about us erasing them? Like we have an Indian and, in one of our floors or whatever. Who's to say that the local Native tribe out east wants that Indian taken away? What if they don't want that Indian head taken away?
I think that was an option in the beginning. I think they took it away from us.
So a bunch of non-Native Americans have decided that we will erase the culture that we have all grown up to know How many of us have gone to a powwow? How many of us have been immersed in the culture since we were children because we live on Long Island? And so a bunch of non-elected people, non-Native Americans, have decided that we are going to erase the Native American culture out of our entire
That's not
community.
necessarily true, though. There
hold on,
are
Stephanie,
Native
Stephanie,
Americans.
don't,
I know,
please.
but I want to
Yeah, but no.
give her
Do me a favor.
information we got.
gotta go-
that
But we
night.
have to follow
Right.
Robert's
Just
rules,
go-
which
go in
means
order.
raise your hand, I'll come to you. All right.
So I just want to understand what would happen if we did have a Native tribe come in and say, we don't want that removed. We don't want that removed. We don't want that removed. Then these other people have the authority.
There was an article in Newsday, I think about 2 months ago, where a district on Long Island, I don't know if it was Wyandanch or another district, did go out and had interaction with the Shinnecock Indians or some Indian tribe, and they got the permission from the tribe not to change the name or something like that. And
It was Wyandanch. They were able to keep their name, but they had to tweak their mascot, the logo that they were using.
Right, but I do think that ship has sailed, as someone said. I don't know if there's still time to do that.
Well, as that person did say that, he did say, because that's the person I reached out to after that article. We were like, well, I'm going to go talk to him as well. Brian Polite, I think is his name. And he said, look, I'm saying this, but that's just me. I don't represent the entire, our council would have to meet and have this conversation. And I don't believe that happened. But yes, he himself had said that. So I said, well, we should reach out and see if he'll have a conversation with us. And I've been unable to put that together thus far. I do believe, however, that this Mascot advisory committee or board, I think we might be able to get some information as to their makeup. And I was told that there are Native Americans on as a part of that committee or that board.
Stephanie, you had something to say?
Just when we went to that dinner,
Mhm.
they had mentioned that. Oh, sorry. They had mentioned that it was too late. They gave us an opportunity already. There are Native Americans on that board that are part of the complaint about all of this. So it's not necessarily, there are people that aren't Native American on the board, but they have a whole panel behind them of Native Americans. With that said, it was already, the ship has sailed because apparently they gave a really long time for districts to do it on their own, and none of them did.
So to that point, that's the 20 years they're saying. If a district during that 20 years had a relationship with a local tribe that had said, yes, we agree, that should be, we're fine with that. But that was during that, it's not like as if a month ago we missed some kind of deadline to do
local
this.
School district close to us that was sitting with us that night, that I don't need to name, actually did do all of that. They changed everything and they were allowed to keep their name because they disconnected it from Native Americans.
Sabrina?
So 20 years ago, there was documentation saying that in 20 years, every district has to move away from Native American imagery.
I think approximately 20 years ago, Commissioner Richard Mills sent out the initial regulation around Chris Venator. Chris and Mike, I'm going to come to you for 1 second. But I believe I don't know what year it was, around 20 years ago, Commissioner Richard Mills sent out an initial document to schools advising them that they should remove Native American imagery. That was about 20 years ago or so. That was spoken to when this regulation was passed, saying 20 years ago, we told districts, you should remove this. We gave that guidance, and many of you haven't. And therefore, here's the new regulation directing you. It's no longer guidance or something. You have something to that?
Yeah, it's April of 2001, right? They sent it, but then they're now tying it to Dignity for All Students Act, right?
Yeah.
So in
But
2010,
in
they passed that, and now they're, right, so 2001 is when they came out with that memo saying you should do this.
Yeah.
But now, today, they're tying it to the Dignity for All Students Act and saying because of that, you have to do this.
Yeah,
So
now it
that's-
became, instead of guidance, back
now it's
then,
you have to.
you have to.
Yeah.
So, okay, Alex?
2 quick points. The president of the Alumni Association, without direction from the board, foiled, and we can look at Allison, and we never received any document that said that to us 20 years ago. in the 20 plus years. We've never received that document. So they could say what they want, but there is nothing in any file that says that the state 20 plus years ago said that. Is that true or false?
No. Hold on. I don't want anyone to say something that's potentially inaccurate. The state, Richard Mills, commissioner, sent a memo to the entire state of New York, is my understanding, in 2001, saying districts, you should no longer utilize Native American imagery. That's my understanding of it. So it wasn't to us, Alex. My understanding was he just like they push out regulation all the time now. In 2001, he pushed that out. I don't know what the impetus was for that or why they did that, but my understanding again was in 2001. It wasn't sent to us. It was sent just in regulation. I just got regulation the other day from the commissioner's office.
All right,
So that's what I mean.
Okay. And part two of my concern is about this resolution. By writing a resolution, we are self-describing us as a group that is in the same lump as the Brentwood Indians, as the Comstock Warriors, as the Massapequa Chiefs, as whoever else falls in this group. And I truly don't believe we're in that group. I really don't. And we were not specifically directed by the state to write the reso. We didn't say, Sachem, you're on our list, you have to write this. I think that if they tell us, hey, you're part of a 40 school districts in New York State group that the commission has come across that we believe that you use this, then we can have this conversation all over again. But I think we are self-harming our district by writing the reso. We are putting ourselves on the list before they put us on. And I think that we should tread very lightly on self-reporting in that instance. Because the word Sachem is Native American. Lake Ronkonkoma is Native American. Every school that we use is derived from Native American. I mean, where does it start and where does it end? That line is very gray, and I just don't think we should even go there. That's just my non-legal opinion.
All right. So, Sabrina, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, sorry. The last thing too is just to point is that, yeah, the conversation started 20 years ago. We were advised. Anybody here who's been in education for 20 years, how many things have been put out there? We advise you to do. Now all of a sudden it's you must, and in 2 years that could cost how much money? And I think that's my problem, is that we're tying ourselves to having to make changes by a specific date that I think is, I don't want to do most of the things, first of all, but I think it's unattainable to have to do this within 2 years, especially what the cost could be. So I think when we write that resolution, I would, if we're going to go in that direction, that the wording has to be, like I said, I want to see the wording of that, because even though, yes, 20-year conversation, but to us, it's really only now been, 8 months, 9 months since we first kind of told that this is the vote has happened. So I understand we're probably going to have to do it. I know that, but I think I would like to see the wording of what that resolution's, going to look like in terms of what we're going to hold ourselves accountable to.
Yeah, to that point, if we can get a draft of whatever resolution, we should look at it. And then again, I don't want to automatically say direct. I think we've got to have conversations. We don't know if we're on this list or not. We need clarity. So if we're going to go down that path. And Chris, I don't know if there's something that we need to, do we get clarity in the next week to say you're on, you're not on? It says we should be reaching out to them if there's any questions. So
Without a doubt, tomorrow, the next day, day after that, I will continue to reach out, and I can reach out to this
Mascot.
advisory.
Yeah.
Look, there's actually it's like Mascot advisory.nysed. I'll send them an email.
Yeah. We need to know if we're on the list, and then we have to deal with it either way. But then we know if we're, which way to pivot.
Yeah. Steph?
We were told at that meeting again that there might be capital improvement funds available for any major expenses to address the concerns about funding. So like with the floors, but then the same conversation, we were told we could cover it at a less expense. But then the frequently asked has, we have to break up floors. So, I think we definitely need clarity. And if you can get that clarity, that would be great.
Yeah.
But
So why don't we do this? Why don't we reach out to the state? Let's get clarity on whether or not we have to. I know we just made a motion to discuss this further in exec session. I'm assuming it's legal advice. Can we get a sample vague resolution for the board to look at to see, what it would say and what it would look like before we go ahead and say, let's send this up.
Sure.
And I know your recommendation is, look, if directed to, they would have to personally direct us after looking at our logo to make changes. And then at that particular point, do we have any recourse? Can we submit a new logo, with the same name that doesn't reflect American Indian imagery? So if the board's okay with that, let's get a sample resolution that we could look at. Okay, that's the least, or the most vague, I should say, and we'll go from there. But at the same time, we'll direct Dr. Pelletieri to call that committee to find out if we can get more details as to whether or not we have to, or
There's a gentleman from New York State Ed running it, David Frank or something along those lines. I have his name, I have his number, and I can reach out to him.
Everybody okay with that? And then we'll discuss the rest of it in the back with legal advice. Okay. Okay. Item 16, future agenda items. Any future agenda items? The board to, yeah, we have that on there, Chris, resolutions, the amended resolutions for NISBA.
I'll do my best. Well, we're meeting in July before.
I would say, we said we were going to put on the
Oh,
July meeting. Yeah, the
Yep.
first July meeting. All right, so we'll put that on. First. Any other future discussion items? Okay, our next meeting is scheduled for June 21st. I need a motion to go into exec session to discuss personnel matters, involving staff members. Motion, Sabrina Pickwood, second. Ms. Cernia, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Have a good evening.